Good morning. We will get started. Today is Monday, June the 1st. This is the State Board of Cosmetology and Barber Examiners Complaint Committee meeting, and we're going to get started. It is 8:06, and I will turn everything over to Legal Counsel Laura Martin. Thank you.
Good morning. So, because we're not having a meeting next month, this report was particularly long. I think in total there was 125 cases, and only about 10 of those were things that needed to be represented. That being said, none of the cases were so particular that I felt like I needed to draw your attention to them. So if you guys have questions, or if you want to just take the next few minutes to skim through, and then I can answer any questions.
I just wanted to ask, the report that I received from Roxana last week, there were quite a few typos, just grammatical. A lot of mangers and mangers rather than managers, things like that. I don't know.
I mean, it's possible that she sent it out before I had a chance to review it, because we kind of sent it back and forth.
Oh, okay. Let me go through and see if some of those.
If there are problems in them, I can fix all the typos before we upload it. I won't change anything, so like.
I understood what the gist was. I'm not the.
I'll do a search and find for that particular word, because I know exactly where we'd highlighted it.
We all do it. Roxana.
Absolutely.
I had two additional questions, just general questions. I didn't have any case-specific questions. I thought those looked great. My first question is just a general sort of question for the group, and maybe to bring to the committee that meets third today, is the manager role. I thought there was one case where an employee, the owner had told the employees that if they were there and open, that they were the manager for the inspections. I'm very confused on the manager role in general, in terms of a barber manager, a Cosmo manager, where we're headed with that with the merged board, and how that would impact contracted employees, since in all of these booth rent shops, these are 1099 employees. These are not employees. And I understand that someone needs to be responsible for following the rules, but I don't understand how you can make a 1099 employee a manager of anyone else, since each person in that particular shop is their own boss, and right. How to address that going forward. I understand that when an inspector goes into like a Sola Suites or a suite rental, he or she has to go to literally every single shop and inspect. But if you go into a booth rent shop, it's considered one shop, and there needs to be a manager there, even though role necessarily, excuse me.
You have a great point, and you're absolutely right that we're going to need to do some of this in the rulemaking hearing, because with part of the laws that passed, one of the things is the dual shops and how it's written. We still don't have the signed public chapters, so once we do, those are really going to help us, because you all have that signed version and we'll have something to take off from. But the law itself doesn't address the manager piece, so we're going to have to address it in the rulemaking hearing. And the way the inspectors do it with the shops that are just one shop license, that's fairly simple and should be straightforward. They go in, and the first question asked should be introducing themselves and then saying who's the manager on duty. I think we're going to take advantage of literature that will go out with the revised shop applications that are going to, I'm planning, and you all are going to have to approve them. I'm putting a checkbox of some sort, making sure that the shop owner is going to read and be responsible for the rules and laws. Just kind of a double check. We always say it. Betty always reminds them, you need to go on the website and read the rules and laws. But we're going to have them check off that they really have acknowledged them. And on the application itself, even now, we've made a bullet point for the manager's role, so that there's no confusion that if the shop's open, there must be a manager. So hopefully that, we're going to do quick tips on the website, educating shop owners, the licensees as well as the public. Try to do those two types of clips. We're supposed to be starting at the end of this month. And then the last piece is, when we look at the rules, is addressing how the board wants to view that manager. The thought with a dual shop is that the manager can be anyone that's licensed. So if you are a dually licensed shop for, let's say, natural hair and manicuring, your manager can be a cosmetologist, a manicurist, or a natural hair. Anybody that knows the discipline and is licensed really should be able to manage. The tricky part's going to be when we're looking at a barber and Cosmo dually licensed shop to make sure that it's going to meet what the law says. And then the studio shops that you're talking about. In theory, if each booth section has their own shop license, they're their own manager.
There might be some best practices
Yeah.
around that.
And then training for our field people. We really wanted to get them back in to train as soon as we can. So,
Yeah, I mean, I feel for someone who's in a booth rental shop. It's not their responsibility necessarily to be someone else's manager.
and they shouldn't. In
But
that
if it's
particular-
one shop license,
That's the whole thing.
what
yeah.
do you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think some shops have a little both. You know, they have some of them that are their own licensed booth sections and they just manage themselves. But then there's some common area, and that's where the owner or whoever's decided to not make everybody have their own license is going to have to know that they really do still need a manager.
So who's going to be
those.
responsible for the laundry and et cetera?
Exactly. And the common area, you know, because the common area might have the foot baths and might have areas that really can be hit with sanitation violations, not just the licenses.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
Good
yeah,
point.
I think that's a great point.
Dogs and booze. There wasn't any booze, but there was a case where there was a dog in the shop, and it was dismissed, and I get that.
Yeah.
Just curious as to, are we really handing out violations for those things? What is the role? I mean, these are not the laws, but the rules.
So with that case in particular, if I can remember, that was a consumer complaint. It was sent in anonymously, and they made a ton of really outrageous allegations against this shop. There were dogs in there, there's booze in there, there's drugs in there. So when it's completely anonymous and the shop has no history at all, and they're all things that couldn't possibly be verified, plus the shop owner wrote in sort of like I'm pretty sure this is a disgruntled ex-employee, sort of just a judgment call that we dismiss it and then send an inspector out there as soon as the meeting, like as soon as this is
Now, if an
agreed
inspector
upon
walked
to
in
check
and
on.
there were,
But as far as having a dog in the shop, I think in this case the owner wrote in and said it was a very small dog, probably like the kind of dog you put in a bag, and it was an old elderly lady. That's how he described it. And they just didn't like want to tell her she couldn't bring the dog. I kind of want to wait and see if an inspector goes out there and any of those allegations can be verified.
inspector goes to a shop and he does find dogs or booze or any of the other rules, I guess cats would be included too, anything not fish, was that a fine?
Yes, that's a citation.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
We don't have that on the agreed citation schedule just because it's almost never a problem. So I would probably just use my best judgment depending on how egregious it is. You know, do you have 4 cats running around? And is it unsanitary, or is it like this where it was just a person stopping in? Or I think there was another one where the shop manager was like, it was after hours, the cleaning guy just brought his dog with him for a couple hours while he was cleaning. I would make a judgment call, but at the current moment, as a board, you haven't made like a decision on how you want to treat that. So I think once we get to an actual verified claim of that happening, we can decide on that, or you can talk about that now. It's just kind of how you would like to go forward with it.
How often is that brought up?
This report, I think, had it twice, once with the elderly lady, and it was a customer, and then once with the guy who they said he was like on cleaning crew, and he
Same
cleaned
place?
after hours. No, 2 different places.
Just 2 different places.
So twice on this report, but so far this is the first report I've seen it at all since I started working here. So I would say probably not too often. And then as far as alcohol, I mean, they are allowed to have alcohol there in a cosmetology shop, right? But they can't sell it. So, I mean, if inspector walks in and they're taking shots and having a party, that might be problemsome if you're also cutting hair and you're inebriated, but just the mere presence of alcohol there isn't going to be a violation because it's allowed.
It is something that the board probably does need to think about as we do the next round of rules for the barber, because those are the calls that I've gotten most of the last 2 weeks, since a lot of the public does know that the legislative session ended and that there's been, a couple large bills in our industry. They're pretty sure that the alcohol is going to be addressed for the barber shops, and I've said, no, it really wasn't. So I think it's something that, if it's in the rules, we can think about, especially as shops keep moving toward being duly licensed. If it's a barber and a cosmetic shop, they still would not be allowed to have alcohol.
We serve root beer, but people forget the word root a lot. They say, oh, man, I came here because I heard you have beer. So we got root beer.
Did you have alcohol at one point?
Never.
Never.
No, I wouldn't want it.
Yeah.
Even if you said it's okay, I wouldn't have it.
Yeah, no,
And I hear that a lot, but those, a lot from, will call and say, you do know that barbershops have it. They just, they just hope you all don't catch it and that kind of thing. So I think it's worth really talking about.
In the big cities, the whole trend of the barbershop thing now is kind of about haircuts and bourbon, or keep your Jack Daniels in your own locker, and the memberships, and it's kind of going that route. So it's something we're going to have to be real cautious of, because I think it's heading down a bad path.
and I didn't bring it up to have my own personal opinion. I was just curious because I think I know of quite a few places where there are dogs and booze. I just didn't know what the inspectors.
They're not, like Laura said, they're not
Dogs
on the
there-
agreed
wait,
citation.
So like dogs there all day long permanently, or somebody comes in with their dog?
Shop
The
dogs.
shop dog?
It's definitely not allowed.
I mean, it's just the rule. I love my dog, but he doesn't need to come to work.
Right, right.
But I was just curious. Okay.
Yeah. Definitely not allowed, but with a lot of these cases, even though I try to fit them into a category, I mean, you really have to be on, like, they're not all the same. Some of them are going to be more egregious. I think someone having a shop dog just hanging around is a little different than a woman bringing in, like, a small teacup, whatever, and
Yeah,
the
I
shop
totally
just
agree.
feeling hard-pressed to tell her, you can't have that in here.
I just was curious.
Yep.
This was the first time in the
That's fair.
report that it's come up, but
Yeah.
it's out there. So I was just curious as to what the inspectors are and aren't doing. So that
They're
helps.
citing them. If they see it, they'll cite it.
Okay.
And it
then
would-
it's
it
and then
would
it
come
kind of
straight to
comes
you.
out. Yeah, like I'll make a recommendation, but if an inspector's seeing it, they're definitely going to put it down. They know that rule.
Number, case number 116, do barbers not get their results the same time like cosmetologists do?
Their exam results? Yes, they do.
Well, how could he been working, waiting on his results?
Case 116 on page
Yes.
36.
Yes.
At the time, I think he had taken the test. He said he was waiting on his results, but I think he was really just waiting to take it again. This is an issue actually that's come up a lot in where someone's gone to school and they're just having trouble testing, but then they like are licensed by the time like the case goes forward. I guess I've been treating that differently than like the straight unlicensed activity, just because the person's already gone through the school hours and is like in the process of getting tested. So while I wouldn't ever recommend dismissing that, sometimes I have a hard time just treating that the same as a person who hasn't been like gone to school or knows anything about what they're doing. That's why sometimes I recommend like the 250, and I usually cite not valid license posted, because then by the time the complaint goes forward, they do have one. That was sort of my own judgment call. As far as him waiting on his results, that was what he said to the inspector, and I don't know. I should have realized that wouldn't work in with the facts, but I know that he had like signed up and was trying to take it again. So that's why. If you guys don't agree with that, I can start treating those differently.
Probably passed at least one of the exams, the theory, but was still
Still waiting on
not
the-
exactly, still taking the practical at least. Yeah.
Oh, I'm fine with that. I thought, well,
That makes sense.
I
Yeah.
was just curious.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's identical, the barbers and the Cosmo.
Question, eyebrow threading, which is in the following, is not regulated by this board.
Regulated at all. Nothing.
How about
Eyebrow threading.
eyelash extensions?
Yeah. Cosmetology.
That
can do
is
it.
covered in
Mhm.
cosmetology.
Aesthetics. Actually, in barber.
There was I guess at one point there was an attempt to regulate it and it was challenged. Not cover eyebrow threading.
Wonder why? I mean, it's a beauty service. I know my spa insurance is twice the price because we do eyebrow dyeing, because we color eyebrows, but here it's not governed at all for threading. It's interesting.
Right.
I think it has to do with the definition of hair removal in the statute.
Several words, but never,
Can
not the
find it.
threading.
Yeah, it includes the dilapidatory, the tweezing, waxing, cutting, and that's it. It doesn't, there's no like open-ended and all other, there's nothing like that. It's the way it was written, it's very like closed. Probably because they didn't contemplate that there was another way.
Right, right. That's what it sounds like to me. It's just because it wasn't capsulized proper in the terminology, but you would think once it got addressed or dealt with, it would make sense to put it under some kind of governing.
That's why the board did penalize and open some complaints, because the logic was, it was meant to be regulated, so.
Yeah,
But
sure.
no, we don't, not yet, or not now.
Question. Duplicates of licenses. Is that something that y'all are issuing now?
Yes. There's an affidavit on the website that folks can fill out. So if someone works at 2 or 3 jobs, which we're seeing more and more of, they ask for a duplicate, and for the $10, we will issue it. The rules that are in the process of being signed, I believe, bumped that price up a little bit to, if I'm not mistaken, $25. But yes, if a person explains to us that they need a duplicate, whether it's because it's lost or they're working in more than one shop, then we absolutely issue them. It's their right, they need to have it, and so forth. Every now and then, I do see with the duplicates that constant asking for a duplicate almost every year. So I have reached out and made a few calls, and really it's to know where they work, so that if the inspectors see a particular, each license has a certificate number, so they can verify with our database that these certificates are legitimate. And so if 3 or 4 have been issued, we can vouch that all 4 are legitimate license numbers. So, but it helps me if we have a place of employment, so that if we need and have questions. So if repeatedly we see that it's done, you may end up with a call from myself or the office manager just to double check.
Upon asking for it, though, they don't have to submit where they're going to be working.
Right, right. It asks for the reasoning for the duplicate is what the affidavit asks for online, and that's really it. It's only when we see a pattern or a problem, or, you know, something feels like it's going on, because this is every single time. It's real obvious with the instructors, and to me it's logical that an instructor almost would need the 2, because one needs to stay at the school, and many of them are working at shops, and so
And also
it just kind of makes sense.
The complaint in the report where you work for like a small chain, it would make sense that for whatever.
Rotate.
Rotated in and out.
I didn't know that that was changed. I think that's a good idea. I was at a school inspection last week.
And I think it's not really been changed. I think it's the way we interpret it, and I think the duplicate just weren't issued unless you lost it. And the trend we've seen, at least since I've been here, or I've asked legal counsel to guide me when I kept seeing the request, is people are working more than one jobs, and the taking back and forth was just very difficult. The licenses were being destroyed. We told them to not laminate them, so you're tying their hands, and it made no sense.
Although I agree 100% with that, I think it leaves us susceptible to people.
It does.
Using, so,
Yeah.
you know, when the license isn't registered to a place and a person, I think it's really kind of a dangerous position. Because now, when an inspector's checking licenses, they're not checking it against driver's licenses, right?
They are.
They are?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh,
You
okay.
need, so when we walk in, we should be looking at your identification, so the picture and the name match what's on the wall.
There's sites where you can get those pretty easily, too. I know.
I know, it's tough to
only need
regulate
about
for
14
those
more
exceptions.
employees.
I know. But, yeah, so yeah, it jumps at us if you've constantly asked for it, and I've been handling those calls myself, because I don't want them to think we don't want to issue it, but we
Right.
need some answers. Legal counsel has said maybe in the rulemaking we consider putting a limit, or saying, not more than 3 a year, something along those lines, but right now, it's rare that people ask for them more than what we think makes sense.
Well, it is 8:30, so I think we have to wrap up so the next committee can start. So, if you guys want to ask any last questions.
I'll second.
Have a motion to approve. A second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Hello, hello.
Hello, go ahead and get started. Today is Monday, June 1st. This is the Reciprocity Committee for the State Board of Cosmetology and Barber Examiners, and it is 8:47, and we will get started. If you can open your iPads to the Reciprocity section, and it is a short one, which is wonderful. We are going to start with an application for reciprocity of a manicurist license. This license is from Illinois for Mathau Jones. The certification shows the license was originally issued on October 2005 by examination with 350 hours. Ms. Jones has provided tax records that include 2008 through 2013. The most recent year where she would have worked in the field, she was on disability, therefore I'm missing the 2014 year, which would have made the 5 consecutive last years, but her work history otherwise is all there. My recommendation is that the applicant be approved for a reciprocal license. She's wanting to get back into the industry and was out due to a disability all of last year.
She's got like 4 years, right?
Well,
Or
she
4 and a
has
half.
2008 through 13, so she
Hey.
has 5. It's just not the most recent. So that's really the only reason I needed to present her to you all, but she's got the 5 years. It just didn't include 2014. She sent her disability papers even so I could see why she hadn't worked.
Oh, we did have that, okay.
Yeah.
Make a motion to approve if she's got the 5 years.
Second.
A motion to approve recommendation and seconded, and all in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
Application for reciprocity of a manicurist license from Florida for Fuen Nguyen. The certification from Florida shows full specialist. Initial license was issued in 2010 with 500 hours. She actually has the next 2 applications, so I want to remind us that we're talking about the same person. The 500 hours makes up 240 for the manicurist, 260 for aesthetics. So for this particular application, the breakdown would be the 240 for the manicuring. No exam is provided in Florida. Ms. Nguyen has provided tax records from 2010 through 2014, so she would have the 5 years as manicuring and skincare. The shops there can do both. So my recommendation for the manicurist license is that the applicant take the Tennessee examination.
She's missing an exam, right?
They don't test at all for the manicuring or the aesthetics.
She's combined both of these together.
They
then.
combine them for 500, and it's called a full specialist. So
Right.
I think we've dealt with this before, where we've had to make that decision. Where does the experience count? They usually can do both things. They definitely need to test in both areas. So when we get to the aesthetics, we'll talk a little bit more about it. But that would be my recommendation for the manicuring, that we definitely require the test and count the hours from the experience.
Her total nail hours were only 240.
Correct.
600 here, right?
So, the difference was in,
If she'd been in aesthetics and nail person here, she would have got 150 hours credited from one field to the other.
Right. So she's using her experience to balance the hours.
to balance it.
My concern when we get to the next application, which is her application, is for the aesthetics, to be honest with you. The manicuring has the 600, the aesthetics has the 750, but it's in Tennessee, the aesthetics cover so much more than the waxing. It's very possible she would only use it for the waxing. But, I keep hearing Ms. Sappenfield's emphasis on the aesthetics, and I think all of the board has agreed that it just needs more hours. So my concern with the aesthetics wouldn't just be the testing, would be the thought of maybe we do require more hours in that particular license.
I don't really have a problem with her nails because if she's had 5 years experience, I think that would be okay. That would balance out with what we're doing across the board for everybody else.
Is her experience in both fields?
Yes. Now, it's hard to tell if, the shop really did both, but the skincare, the manicuring shops in Florida are allowed to do both. They're allowed to wax. I don't know how far they go with the facials or any of that.
I make a motion to accept her hours for nails,
Second.
And that she take the test.
and she take
take
both
test.
tests.
Okay,
That's their recommendation, yes.
yeah. Motion made and seconded that we accept the recommendation that she test. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, so the next application for reciprocity is for the aesthetics license from Florida for Ms. Fuang Nguyen. The certification, again from Florida, has her as a full specialist. The initial license is issued in March of 2010 with 500 hours. So the breakdown would be 240 toward the manicuring and 260 toward the aesthetics. No exam provided. Her tax records, which are one and the same, show the almost five full consecutive years in the skincare industry. My recommendation with the aesthetics is that she take the additional hours. It would be at least 250 hours if we recognize the 500. And then, of course, take the examination.
I'd move that we accept the recommendation. I think that'd be fair.
I'll second.
A motion and seconded that we accept the recommendation that she complete the hours and take the exam. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Application for reciprocity of a cosmetology license from Michigan for Ramon Abdel Malik. Certification shows an initial licensure in 2014 by Reciprocity from Damascus. Mr. Abdel Malik was going to try to appear before the board to answer any questions. He came by the board office and spoke to me personally. His request was presented to the board at the February 12th, 2015 board meeting, and the board decided that he
Here he
needed.
is now.
Oh, he is?
Uh-huh.
Good morning. Come on up, sir. I'm glad you're here.
Good timing, didn't he?
If you speak, make sure and push that red button, okay? Let me finish explaining. Thank you.
Morning.
Morning.
So he did receive a letter with the board's decision from the February 12th, 2015 board meeting. The decision was that he take and pass the practical exam. He has taken and passed the PSI exams in Michigan. He provided these for me at the time in February. I did not have them to present to the board. So if you look on your iPads, page 14 and 15 shows that he has passed both of those. And he's appearing before the board to request that we approve those exams in lieu of him taking the practical again here because of the language difficulty. So
How many hours is in Michigan?
the same as we do, the
Oh, okay,
1,500.
so we're
So
good.
the issue, of course, is they accepted international hours, and with international hours, we always request that they test. And so at least for the practical, that's how we've consistently done it. And so that's the way the board voted. Having tested in Michigan and tested with PSI, if the board, that's what the board would be considering because of the language issue.
That's the same one we use here, right?
Yes.
So you took the written and the practical exams?
Yes,
Okay.
They don't give us the score, but they require a 75% passing in Michigan, and he passed on both of them.
What is your recommendation?
That we approve the
Approve
reciprocal
it.
license. We're really, with the language issue, it's
It's
hard to push that if they've tested here, I think.
On our previous decision, we didn't know that he had tested, correct?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct. That's correct. We didn't have proof that he had, and I couldn't get it from PSI. They're not able to cross that over
Right.
and give that to me.
Since Michigan accepted his international reciprocity, I don't think that we really need to question that from them.
Right.
Accept the recommendation.
Second.
Motion made and seconded that we accept the recommendation for reciprocity. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
Congratulations, and thank you for coming
Thank
in on
you.
a rainy day.
thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
We're going to send you an approval letter, okay?
He's taking the PSI.
Tennessee's PSI requirement is 70.
If the board will give me a minute, I'm going to walk
right
him through
ahead.
so he can go
Yes, that's
upstairs.
fine. Gotta get a water.
Would you mind?
Oh, yeah, I got mine in the mail the other day.
Thank you for waiting.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Next on our iPads, we have a
luck.
reciprocity. I'm sorry.
Oh, he's thanking us.
He's very appreciative.
He is.
Yeah. Reciprocity application for a cosmetology license from Connecticut for Barbara Plague. Certification from Connecticut shows an initial licensure in 1986 with 1,500 hours, but there's no practical issued in Connecticut. Ms. Plague was also licensed in Florida by Reciprocity, and again, Florida would not have given either of the exams. When she received the letter stating that she was required to take the practical exam, she contacted the office and had asked that we consider all of her work experience between the two states for a total of 28 years and forgive her for the practical, and my recommendation would be that we approve her reciprocal license.
28 years ago, what were our requirements?
They were very low, I'm sure.
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Did you have did she send in proof of those 28 years, or?
She has, we have tax records on her, and I believe also a letter. Give me just a minute. She starts with her part-time work in 86, goes all the way to Connecticut from 90 to 92, rented a chair in La Bella Hair Design from 93 to 96, 96 to 2005. Also in Connecticut, she was at a lodge and retirement community doing hair. 2008, healthcare facility doing hair, and then 2011 through 2012 in Florida, and then her last would be December 2014 as a manager in a salon. So it does skip here and there based on moves probably and that kind of thing, but she's got a resume and a letter explaining her work experience. We don't have tax records for the last 5 because she's got the right number of hours, so she really, didn't submit it for that reason. It's just all the experience throughout the years.
I have a recommendation to accept. With 28 years.
A recommendation to accept her work experience and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, so we are finished with what's on your iPads. As I mentioned just briefly before we got started, Friday the board office received an application for reciprocity. I've got the file, so I'll be happy to pass it around, but it's a very similar situation to what we just heard with Miss Barbara Plague. It's for Miss Angela Stevens. Miss Stevens is from Alabama. She received her initial license in 1986. The problem that we have, and that's why I'll pass it around, is Alabama's license she allowed to expire. And so the Alabama license shows an initial licensure in 2010, and then it goes ahead and she moved from there to Florida, so Florida's initial license was issued in 2008 through 2016. And so there's no real proof that she got a license way back in 1986. She has been going back and forth with Alabama asking them to revise the license, but it hasn't been. They state on their license that it's by reciprocity, so it kind of makes the situation a little bit difficult. I told her I'd be happy to let the board read her email and her explanation, and then we can go from there. It's going to be the first thing in this file.
Is this one where we've already made a decision on?
No, because let me get to it. To my, let you see it.
Has she went and asked for reciprocity?
Yes,
to
she
the state of
requested
Alabama?
reciprocity, but I never presented her to the board because I was able to send her the letter saying that she needed to take the practical exam.
Right.
I'm talking about
Based,
in Alabama since she couldn't get it reinstated unless
Right.
they do reciprocity. Has she
and
been
they'd have
before
to
their
test
board?
her, so she's not done it because of that. So her letter explains she went to school and did the 1,500 hours. She actually did the hours in high school, so she's had the hours since '86. Her letter explains that She was licensed originally in Alabama, and Alabama tests, so she would have had to take the exams. The problem is that their certification shows she was initially licensed in 2010, not 1986, which would mean, and that she was licensed by Reciprocity, which would mean that her first license is Florida's. And if Florida's her first license in 2010, she would not have taken the practical. So I told her that, you know, we would review her email. It's basically at this point, it's her words on the email that the board's gonna have to decide what to do.
Really need something to back it up like we had with this other lady, right?
And if we'd had a meeting in July, I'd have put it off, but we don't, so that's the reason I'm putting her through in paper, if you will, just so she doesn't have to wait for our decision.
Do you have a recommendation?
I don't know what to say. I mean, I hate to see someone wait until August. If the board is comfortable with me reaching out to Alabama, if they can correct the certification and date it what it should be, then I would recommend that that's not a problem, because it would prove that she tested.
Some paper backup or something, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
It appears that her first license was in Alabama because she says that,
Right. But if you look at Florida, Florida doesn't let us know when they accept someone by reciprocity. And you know, at first I didn't realize that until they had originally been licensed by us and should have been reciprocity. So Florida's license from 2008 makes it look like that's her first license. That's the problem. So yes, we can definitely, and I told her, I said, I believe what you're saying on the email. The problem as a regulatory agency is that we have to have these certifications, and it contradicts because Alabama starts in 2010.
Your dates, I mean, it's just like anything else. Your dates have got to be matching somewhere.
Right, right. The real data that if we're audited is looked at isn't going to match the information. So if the board, I think my only recommendation would be if Alabama can correct the certification or send a letter that explains how that date can be wrong, then if the board's okay, I could approve the reciprocity and send it to her. Otherwise, we really need the practical exam because the records just don't agree.
I'd make a recommendation if she can get us some documentation that coincides with her dates that she has stated, then I would let you go ahead and make the decisions on what to do.
second.
We have a motion and a second that we go with the recommendation that she provide proof of the Alabama license, and that's also proof that she has tested correctly?
Correct. That's
Correct?
the big piece. Alabama
Yeah.
does the practical and the
Okay.
theory.
That's what we
where
need
Florida
here.
doesn't. That's exactly.
Okay.
Did you make the decision then,
And,
Roxana?
yeah,
Okay.
and then Roxana can move forward based on that information. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
So if Alabama can verify her records, then.
Her original
she's good.
license date, then
she's
we're
good.
okay. Good. And that's all we have for the Reciprocity Committee. So we can wait for the large, meeting to vote it in. Thank you. Thank you for considering her in paper. Like I said, had we had a meeting next month, I'd have put it off. So
sure.
we will send her that letter, and that concludes our Reciprocity Committee meeting.
Okay.
See everyone back later. Thank you, Patty.
Other committee meeting, correct?
Yes, the Rulemaking Committee.
Are y'all?
No, you gotta stay.
No.
Okay, so we are going to begin the Rulemaking Committee. Glad everyone could be here.
Morning.
Let's see, what all do we have here? Okay, I was just telling Mr. Gillingham I'm prepared a little bit for the first time ever.
It is all yours then. I have nothing on your iPad, so you go right ahead. Thank you, Ms. Barger.
Okay, so last month we talked about several ideas and how to improve best practices for schools, And when we left, we had kind of given an assignment to all of us to start working on a list of things that may be added to improve. Well, we talked about the, the idea of schools being accredited and the process that goes through. And we kind of talked about, well, we can't really force everyone to be accredited, but we can maybe improve our standards. So I've typed up, I'm going to give everybody, there's 2 pages. There we go. 2, 3, 4. Another, did you guys? So a lot of these things are things that we talked about last time, but mainly I thought, well, we just need to start a list so we can cross through things and add things, or just something to begin with. So I started with school requirements because that's what we were talking about most, and a couple things that I felt were important. One, before they when they apply for the license, let's see, some of this stuff I've sort of taken from the materials that Mr. Gilliam had sent out from the NACIS, which was very good. But it's so much that you had to, I tried to condense it because it's just a lot to get into. And I tried to condense it into the things that, we could possibly think about adding. So before they are approved, I thought it would be a good idea for the board to look at their curriculum and maybe their schedule as to how they were going to teach, instead of just, we're going to teach Milady, or, how they're going to go about doing that specifically. And then that they should produce, their catalog of courses they're going to offer, their brochure, a copy of their contract, not just what they're, of course they have to do that now, I guess, but I don't think we require them to show their catalog and brochure now. So that might be a good thing, just to have that to get started. I don't know how people open businesses without really without a plan, but they do. So like I said, that's just a place to begin. And then for their operation of the school, and then 2, maybe these things can be incorporated as inspections are done, that they have to
Have a copy to submit to
Yeah,
the
maybe
inspector, maybe?
resubmit, or if there are,
Yep,
oh
they
yeah,
look
or
at
if
it.
they make
Has to say,
changes,
yeah.
then they submit their changes yearly or whatever.
There's a lot of times, like with NACIS, if we make changes, we don't have to submit to them because all that is in-house. If you do that, then they're going to be overflowed with stuff in their office.
Oh yeah,
But if
just
it's
at the
something-
inspection.
Right, it's just, if it's something big, I would say yes, but like, if you decided to switch your books, or something like that.
Similar to if a school expands and it's a substantive change in the layout, it's considered like a move. We've got to go and inspect. But if it's, you took one of the closets and added shelving or took down the door so we wouldn't need to go, is how attorneys in the past have helped guide me. But if you've taken over the shop that was next door and knocked down that wall and are expanding, then it's considered, a real expansion and a change in location we'd have to inspect. So it depends. I think we can put that word as a substantive change. Then we'd need to see the contract. I think that's a great idea. But otherwise,
Or just, when now inspectors will do the yearly.
correct.
So maybe the school could produce all of their updated materials, or if it's the same, still produce it, just to have.
To be seen.
Yeah, just to have somebody have eyes on it and
to make sure you do still have something in place.
Absolutely.
So other things we talked about were, under the operation of the school, is to have a backup for the time clock or hours earned. And, you know, we've seen how that's important. And then possibly keeping the full-time and part-time students' files separately so that when an inspector comes in, they can see, well, this person's part-time, so they're not here, you know.
Kind of like we, on the front of all of ours, we either put full-time or part-time on the cover of the file that they're looking at, so they know right off. They can just write it on there, like in the Sharpie real big,
Right.
as long
That's
as it's
true.
labeled, you know?
And some other things that we talked about already, and I've just put down on paper, is that the contract must include a discrimination policy. I think someone had recommended that, legal. And include a place where students can initial page numbers so that we know pages aren't missing.
That they actually number the pages and then put an initial
Yes.
beside of it. So, you know, this document has 6 pages or 3
Yes.
pages.
Of which my documents have no numbers on there. Anyway. And that the student initials, they have received a copy and they take it home. So,
That sounds like such a simple thing, but I think
Yes.
it's vital because
Absolutely.
we do get calls
Yeah.
saying, I was never handed the contract.
Anytime
And-
we make any changes, I mean, like even if your number's off and you've misadded like $1,
Right.
we make our students sign off and then we have to sign under them, initial under them, you know, right beside where the change was, so that it
Well, what
shows.
can happen with the field inspector going in and doing the full inspection is if these contracts aren't signed and initialed properly, that is an easy way for them to cite a notice of violation.
Right.
That it's going to be able to really be followed up on.
yes,
Needs to be.
something that's
Yeah, yeah.
tangible they can look
Right.
for.
You know, there's so many things that can go into any of these contracts, and we're not trying to tell people how to run their business per se. We just want to make sure that we have some guidance out there that at a very minimum, we're going to have a checklist of these items that should be in there or that must be in there for us. A receipt at a minimum, we can do it in such a way that a layperson, anybody off the street could walk in and take the form and say, yes, this is in compliance. I really think we need to make it so that it can be that simple. If the business wants to make their policies very complicated or whatever, that's up to them, but they just need to have a way to document that certain things are there. I'm looking at your list here, and I know we had some discussion in the last meeting about having a backup for their time clock or the hours. We've seen definitely recently how important that is. I don't know, how does the board feel about requiring a certain type of backup? I don't know that I have an opinion on that myself. You know, if you're doing it on paper and electronics, I just think there needs to be some redundancy to it in case of disaster.
The students need to be added too. They need to be like taking pictures of their time clocks every Friday when they leave after they clock out. Take you a shot and you've got a copy, and if you dispute our copy, then you can say, this is what I have, you know.
Most schools would probably take attendance in some way because I think most clock hour schools require attendance. So at the end of the month, and my school is certainly not the example for everybody, I don't mean it that way, but in our schools, I do know that we have our students sign an attendance report at least at the end of the month, if not at the end of the week. Anything like that is going to give the student some kind of a documentation. And furthermore, all this business of students saying, I was never told or I don't know, whenever they're signing that goes in their files. Well, you were told every week, every month of where your position was and where you stood.
We do like progress reports every so many hours, like 400 and 600, and then they get a copy of that. I mean, they get a copy, we keep a copy.
Do they sign a copy and put it
Yes,
back in?
Yes.
when we give their, they have to sign off on their progress report. Can y'all hear me out there? Yeah.
Ms. Granger? Thank you.
It's so far away. On the progress report, does the student have a copy along with the school?
Yes.
Or it's just,
They
okay.
do.
Yes.
We give them that, and then other contracts, they get copies of it. You know, now what they do with their copy, who knows? Because they'll come back in and say, well, I've lost my so-and-so.
So
So, we can add to this list maybe, student report hour, or what did you call it?
Progress reports.
Student progress reports.
Well, I did, well, that's just tests and evaluations, should be kept in the student file, because I've been to schools, and they have the contract and the age requirements, but you don't know what they've been doing for the past 6 months.
Yeah.
Because there's no,
And a lot of times what we run into too, if we have a transfer student and they've done their tests, I think it should be in there that they are required to bring a copy from their old school of all the tests they have taken, so they don't have to the transcript from their prior school, so they don't have to retake if they passed it, you know?
right, well, that could be up to each school, because maybe one school, they're not gonna accept hours at all, so it doesn't matter. But as far as what they're doing in the school they're enrolled in and reporting hours to the board to, I think it's important for an inspector to go in and be able to look at their progress, just so that there's a way to measure that the school is doing something besides just sitting around.
Yeah.
So you're not saying dictate what their progress needs to be,
Right,
it's just.
just
make
show
sure
us
they
your
have
progress,
copies.
show us your evaluation.
Make sure they say progress report in the folder.
But as far as the backup for time clock, if a student signed an hour report each month, that way they couldn't say, you know,
They didn't know how many hours they had, or they didn't know.
Well,
A lot of students, they feel like they don't know what hours they have, you know.
I'll come in and say, look at my hours, tell me how many I have this week. Every week they do. So-
That's where if a progress
Yeah.
report existed,
Yeah,
that would
right.
take care of that. If that's
Because it
added.
tells everything. Yeah. I think a progress
I think
report.
Got a
could work.
copy of it, it would also give them a backup, like where we have
That's
these
true.
situations where students are saying, I went.
So maybe it's like
I
a
did it.
monthly evaluation,
I would do hourly probably, wouldn't you?
but I
Because
mean, like a, at
like
the
we do
end
our
of-
monthly report, like
A monthly report
of the
of hours, yeah.
What we
Yes.
do, we post it on the bulletin board without numbers, you know? We have that, and then we post it on the bulletin board, and that way they can see what they've had and what we've turned into the state every month too. And that's a good way for them to know that it is being turned in.
There's some privacy issues you have to be careful
Yeah.
about, that's what she's alluding to, but, folks, again, I don't wanna make this overly complicated, it doesn't have to be that way. Most schools would be given a report anyway, I'm not trying to say that we need to add more work or make it more onerous for the school, but in the sense of, if we can make it this, some sort of a checklist for a new school, and certainly existing schools would need to come on board as well, that they have at least a monthly progress report. They can put as much information on it as they want, but we might want to say that it needs to have at least what their current hours are, what their current grade is. You know, there are examples, if you looked at some of the NACAS worksheets and example sheets, that just simply have blocks on there, and you insert what their GPA is at this point in time. If a school wants to test you 6 times over a particular chapter, okay, that's their business, but you at least need to have a grade for every chapter that you've covered in the book by graduation time, I would think.
Oh, yeah. I was just, in my mind, so an inspector who has no idea about how schools work can walk in and look, okay, this student was enrolled in January. They've not had a leave of absence. Now it's September. They should have 9 evaluations with a copy in the student file and something the student has signed that they've received that includes their hours for that month. Just so that there's something's documented,
A trail.
yes.
And then whether it's all in written format in a locked file cabinet or electronically, that it can be whatever the school probably needs to charge, and they need electronic systems.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be hard even if it was if they did all their paper to, this is their grade for this month, whatever they've been studying, and this is their hours for this month.
Yeah, because it'll be documented along the way. So I don't think it will be extremely hard.
Okay.
It's basically, in my mind at least, it's just very basic, simple record
yeah.
keeping.
Yes.
And if a business is going to be diligent and do the right things, they're going to keep it anyway. And if they're
Right.
not, then
There's trouble.
there's trouble, and the inspector would be able to see it pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's the only way, is just to keep a pulse on it a little bit easier, instead of finding out there's a mess when we see the mess.
I think the list's fantastic,
I
and it
do.
will help the inspectors be able to step in.
Have they been through training on what to look for and everything?
Well, because of the law changes, we were hoping to bring them in
Excuse
pretty
me.
soon for various trainings. So
Uh-huh.
they will be in probably at least on a conference call training and then in person all here very soon. This was one of the big things, because by August 30th, all the cosmetology schools will need to be inspected, and they'll be doing it. So most of them have been to inspections with board members, and they've been taking note to the fact that they're gonna be the ones doing the paper files as well as the sanitation. And so I just think giving them more guidance is fantastic. Because
Checklist.
when it's
Yeah.
not there, it's easy for them to decide, okay, this is a notice violation, because it's not
Right.
here.
Instead of it getting out of control like we've
Yes.
seen.
Yes.
One of the
Absolutely.
things that, going in and not knowing anything about the orders of things, I just kind of put it off to just lousy bookkeeping, kind of. But I think it would be really helpful if there was just like a protocol to the date line. A lot of that I had to go through and organize to just be able to read it. And then the other thing is a lot of things were copied and put in there. And I think if there was like like maybe just the paper that they use to make copies for official files, maybe it should have the name of the school and a signature line and a date line on, like, if it's a copy of their driver's license, if it's a copy of their school diploma, just so that it's really a document. And in medical files and other agencies, that's required, because it's just paper. And I have opened several files at schools, and it would be really suspicious who even signed that stuff, you know. And at least if you had the paper this school uses has like the school name, date line, and a signature line, at least the signatures would be consistent. You could follow a date line of when all this stuff was done, and I think it would be a lot more organized and easy for someone to go in and inspect. And that would be,
Or it's like there's driver's license, social security in their transcripts. Things we have to have in the school.
Most of those things are already written into the rules.
And, yeah, it's
well, if
already
they
in
would
there.
just copy it on a sheet of paper that had a date line and a signature, that would work. But I mean, I came across files that had different things and multiple
That's a red flag. That's a red
pages.
flag then.
and,
You know, that should be in
and
a red
different
flag.
signatures. Like maybe that should have been 2 or 3 different people's files.
But to the schools, to be their advocate, all we require is that it's just in there. It could be a picture of it, you know, and stuck in there. We haven't given them yet any other guidance, so that's what we're trying to do.
You know, it's just like the inspectors going out to a lot of the nail shops, and they don't know who is licensed as whose. That's why I think it would be good to have a photo ID on all your licenses when you renew.
I would second that.
You know.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if any of y'all are old enough to remember, but when I went through school in the barber courses, we were issued a student license at the time. I think it was $15. At your station while you were working, even in school.
I think you're right. None of us are old enough to remember.
But there is one state that does the photo ID, and they get all their, like, their cosmetology license renewed at the DMV. And you go in there in the kiosk, you do it, it takes your picture, and then your Cosmos license comes out to you with your picture on it.
Well, the PSI requires photos, don't they? So.
Right, and that's the file, the photo we have for everybody's through PSI, and then Reciprocity, we require a photo. But yes, we are looking at the possibility, hopefully in the near
I think that
future,
would be
for
good.
the
That'd be
licenses
great.
to include.
It would make the
some type
inspector's
of
job a
photo.
lot easier, I think.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
So just moving
I
on
love
through
this.
this list, now we don't really require that they have, or maybe we do, receipts for any kind of payment or
Yes, we do.
refund? We
Yes,
do,
we do.
okay.
Yes.
I couldn't remember. Or for refunds is what I was thinking of. We do. Okay, thank
On
you.
that original contract, they have to
In the
have it. We don't,
Okay.
you all have been very particular about making sure it's
Right.
there.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, you know, just requiring that the school has a policy, whether or not they're going to receive other hours from different schools or not at all, or if they have a testing procedure, just so that maybe, you know, that would be included in the catalog that we would ask for, that they just have that in mind for when someone comes to them and asks them if they can transfer there. Okay, and so then this was taken from the NACAS thing too, about leave of absence, and including that in the file, which I guess we have that.
That comes again with your schools. Some of them are not accredited through NACAS.
Right.
So
So
you know,
well, I'm just thinking if we can pick like the important things and require
all
that through the
schools
state.
need a leave of absence. Yeah.
Moving on to curriculum, that the student is given an outline that they say they have, so they know. This is just, in my mind, so that a school would prepare a little better, because it seems like they just kind of open and they say, okay, we're gonna have instructors and y'all get in there and learn stuff, you know. But this is just so that we can kind of raise the standards a little bit.
We have seen a lot of bad schools, but we have a lot of good schools too.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You know, that are going right by what they should be doing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know, on that note, I'd like to say that those good schools out there that are doing these things correctly are probably doing way more than what we're talking about here anyway. And I'd like us to be careful in how we do these things, because if we start putting too many things in there, it's going to constrict how they can best do their job. We're talking about best practices. Some of them have some really good practices that exceed what we're talking about. We don't want to pull them back.
Right.
We don't want to make them cut back.
Right.
So we can craft with enough broadness here that we can offer some growth opportunities for
Really
them.
give the guidelines for the inspectors to look for. That way, if there is a problem like where you've seen the files weren't right, you should send them a red flag in this one, have somebody else come in and look at it, you know?
If a school, like under this second bullet point here, if a school just had, you know, the name of the course, nail, and then just a little description, you know, the evaluations that they'll have, and just sort of if they had a guideline to follow, then I believe they would be happy to have guidance. And then, of course, like you mentioned, the ones that are doing above and beyond, they're going to do above and beyond anyway. So, anyway, I just wanted to have just a starting point.
That's
like I
good,
said, that
though.
we can cross through things.
You did good on your homework. I'm proud of you.
This is, I used my sitting in the hospital time effectively this past visit.
I was going to say, once we develop these best practices to open the school, what we can do once those are in writing and through the rules, that's to open. But our field people, when they inspect, can hand this out to all the schools already open, as this is the best practice that we'll be looking at as we inspect, and just
Start to
that
conform,
guidance.
yeah.
And feel free to meet or exceed.
Right. Exceed is fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
that's
and then I also added, we also talked about the, you know, aesthetics. There's so much work to do there. So I kind of copied this from Washington State, which you mentioned had done some work in developing a master esthetician license and the esthetician license. So I added that just as a sort of, just to see what other states are doing to address is that what you were looking at?
Yeah, last year, there were new laws enacted in the state of Washington that defined aesthetics.
So I
So this is the newest.
yeah.
So you would like to add this to the curriculum for aesthetics, in other words?
That would be
That's what you're.
a big advance for the
that's what you
estheticians.
want to do.
And let me copy this or send this around too. This is, I guess this is from Washington State as well. They sent out, of course, for all the people that are already licensed, there's 3. What you have to do to be grandfathered in. And this is just for information here.
I have a question while she's passing it out. This may be very redundant, but I don't know the answer. A person that applies makeup and makeup only, do they require a license?
That's a discussion I think we're
Yes.
getting into.
Yes. So they can't just say, hey, I'm a makeup artist and go in and out of people's homes
Not
and
at all.
businesses and do makeup.
Correct. They're
The-
licensed
There's
as
a
a,
few, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a few exceptions that people keep finding. If you are selling the product, you can apply it for free of charge.
No, I'm starting to see a lot of makeup artists popping up
And we
all
talked-
over,
right, we talked
charging
about that
people
at the
from
last meeting.
$50 to $75 to apply a face of makeup. And I think I was once told that the makeup application go under the aesthetics.
and
Is that correct?
cosmetology and barbering. Barbering teaches
Barbering.
makeup as well. It's all three, but you must be licensed.
I have a question, Laura. It was always my understanding, and I'll just say a brand name was like Mary Kay. If a Mary Kay consultant goes out to do a makeup show, it was my understanding that she can sell the product and describe it and coach you through it, but that she couldn't physically or he couldn't physically put that on you. You had to do it yourself. Is that correct?
Buy it to
They
you,
can't-
they can't charge a fee. They can't say,
Charge for that.
I'm selling this product and also I'll put all this makeup on you for $30. What they can do is say, I'm selling this product and then apply it as part of their sales pitch. It's kind of like makeup counters in malls. They can't really charge, but they'll do all of your makeup, sort of assuming that you're going to buy a product.
It's just like they'll bring in a platform artist and they'll have a booking fee of like $200, but they'll give you a kit of more than $200 in value. So you get the kit, you get the makeup artistry on, but those are unlicensed people.
I guess there's really only that one exception, but people keep finding ways to make it apply. Okay, so we were just talking about this in the legal committee. This definition from Washington State is really good and so much better than ours. My only thing I want to point out is we cannot include threading in our
I
rules.
just copied it from.
Just because
Washington
the state of Tennessee Supreme Court has decided we do not regulate threading. So until the statute says we regulate it, we can't make a rule about it. But this is exactly what I was looking for, like a way to define what facials we think fall within the esthetician's purview that doctor for.
So Laura, is this something that we could use as part of adding to or writing in just rules without having to go through regulatory, or would we have to go through some kind of legislative action?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Without going through every single term here, I just want to like couch my response that I need to go through every term here like specifically and check it out. But from skimming it, I think most of this could fall within the definition, but it would just like make the definition clear as opposed to sort of ambiguous. And we could create a rule that says like a further definition of aesthetics. There might be just a few things in here that would fall outside, and I'll just go through and like the threading, things like that. I can go through and cross them out, but I think that this could be a rule at first glance, and that would be fine.
I don't know about the master esthetician, where that falls. If we have the leeway to create such a thing, that's creating a brand new license, so.
Right.
I
That's,
don't
and I
see
know
that as
that's a bigger
possibility,
thing as
but-
rule, but I thought, well, if there's such a gray area between who can do what and how deep you can treat the skin, and clearly there's not enough education in school to get the license immediately. I just thought, well, you know, we can start talking about it. This is what another state has done.
I don't know if we could create a license, but I think that schools could offer a program that's sort of like advanced aesthetics.
Some already do.
Right. So if you wanted to have more definition around that, but that's like, I wasn't considering that as a new license. We couldn't create a new license.
Oh, no, it's my feeling that you'd like to see a separate license for that, correct?
I would like to see an attachment to, for us to regulate it. I mean, it wouldn't be something that we would incorporate as an institution and have it unregulated, if that's the question.
Since I really don't know much about estheticians and all the work that you do, are these things under the master esthetician? Is that something that's currently being done under the esthetician license?
Not under Tennessee.
Okay.
Not in
Okay.
Tennessee. It is in other states.
Okay.
Of course, Washington, and then the district, Washington, D.C., Georgia has a master esthetician.
So if we were to, let's just say hypothetically, if we were to take this Washington state definition of esthetician and A through F there, if we said this is what it is, and the things that are under the master esthetician, this is not what it is.
Right.
Narrow a definition there.
I think in the grandfathering, there's an explanation here, like if that you could be grandfathered into it if a licensed esthetician instructor or at least 3 years experience.
Right.
But we would have to actually, as a board or as an agency, decide on adapting a national or international diploma certification in aesthetics that's recognized by us. And that would actually be a big leap for getting master estheticians identified, because they've already been certified by these particular associations through testing.
It helps me to understand. Okay.
This is fantastic. It really is. I appreciate you recapping this the way you did. If I could, before we run out of time, add one thing to the school items that we talked about. It's the only thing I can think of that we've discussed a little bit, and then we probably at the end of our meeting will need to touch on it some more, but it came back up in the last few weeks, is if it's worth us stating in the rules somewhere in there what the role of the student in cleaning the school is. Is that worth addressing lightly, comparing it to the type of discipline they're learning? You know, we've had complaints before opened by students, and then recently we had a school with a scabies outbreak, and so it kind of came back up, and I thought, okay, we probably need to, at the Rule Committee, kind of think about this. If it's something that can be in the contract so students know going into it, this is what will be accepted, and just, we don't need to resolve it today, but start thinking of, you know, there's a line where they probably don't need to clean the bathrooms, is my thought, and that's just my personal thought, but there's probably an area where, and as school owners you'll know, they need to learn the sanitation and the cleaning up after the area that applies to what they're learning. And then there's some common area that they need to learn, you know, but how do we put this?
Because in the
rule?
OLAW book, it states they should mop every day, the students should. And to me, I think it's just part of it. I did it. I mean, we all went to school that did it. Well, you did your sanitation, you know. And it's, some of the students nowadays don't think they need to do it. But when they're not going to do it in school, then they're not going to do it in their shop, and then you're going to be in another mess.
I think it's worth adding to this original contract for the
Right,
schools.
okay.
However the board wants to really word it. I don't know if we touch on if there's a situation such as an outbreak, how should the school handle it? And then general cleaning versus very specific, just something along the lines, because then if the student knows and it's in there in the forefront, they can't file, not that I can't say they can't, but they shouldn't file a complaint and complain about the mopping. It's generally the over the top that they'll complain about when they really had to deep clean. We don't get the, I was told to mop. That seems to be pretty accepted.
That might escape from some of these young girls that they didn't know how to mop.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. I'm like, okay. So,
We just need to make a standard that, yes, you may be required to mop, but You do not have to
Sa-
clean
do
the
sanitation,
bathrooms.
you know, if they just have a sanitation page in their catalog. That the
Yes.
students are required to do sanitation as part of their training and, and
As it
stuff.
relates to their course,
Right.
maybe, whatever they're studying.
I have been talking about this past week, and I have to say my sentiments were pretty similar to what Mr. Gillihan said, that I would hate for the board to not contemplate a business model that could exist in the future and then make it so that it violates a regulation just because we didn't contemplate it. So I think if you make rules that look to overarching themes, like students that write in complaints, generally, no matter what the substantive issue is, the first thing is I didn't know. So maybe like if we have this idea that if students are really well informed of exactly what they're getting into and what they're signing up for, some people are always going to be displeased, but I think a lot of people, when they know what they're getting into, they're fine with it. So,
Put a
I would
checklist
hate to
in
say
there or
you
something.
can't, the school can't let them clean,
Mm-hmm.
because that just doesn't make any sense. Guidelines, so not that we need to dictate the guidelines, but guidelines so the student knows what they're getting into is, I think, the best
Even if they have like an
policy.
overall checklist of their orientation and have it listed on there and you put a check beside it and then they sign and then the administrator signs at the bottom. Something simple. You know, so you can just keep it simple so that.
Is there a designation in the curriculum for orientation?
There's nothing in the curriculum. Those
should
things
be.
really are more in policy manuals, I think, for most schools. Policy manual, which they're not
I
required.
attended one, not to interrupt, but I thought it was very informative. I can't imagine someone not.
A policy manual,
Getting
is what that business is. So some of them have more policy, some have less. It might come in the format, I think members, if we have minimum requirements in a policy manual that you might have, or that the school should submit their plan for how you're going to deal with this, or just to acknowledge that you have a plan. Whether it's a limit or a maximum time frame on a leave of absence.
Isn't there like a state, I mean, isn't there a law that you can only get like 6 months of leave of absence or something like that? Where'd I read that? Maybe that was NACAS or something.
That's a NACAS.
That's a NACAS rule, that's what that was, I'm sorry.
I have a question that I just don't know the answer to. So, a student I know can request a leave of absence from the school, but if they just, we've had problems with schools before with students just showing up, a little bit here, a little bit there. Is a school, I guess it would be they could do whatever they want, but a school can just terminate the student or like do an involuntary leave of absence? I mean,
It would depend on their contract.
Okay.
What are the rules in their contracts and policies?
okay, which we don't have.
Right now, schools are free to organize that and regulate it how they want. The only limitation we have on it is that they have to complete their schooling within 7 years from the day they started. So that's the only limitation imposed by the board or the statute even, so.
Oh, well, a way that we could, I believe we talked once before about enforcing the minimum hours required for part-time and full-time. But if an inspector went in and, there are 50 lingering enrolled students in only one instructor, that would be a violation. So that might be the way to keep track of, what we've seen in the past, so.
I hate to interrupt us, but we're right at about 10. If we could go ahead and wrap up the rulemaking.
I believe we have one comment here during the rulemaking.
Good morning. Ryan Hurd from Shear Academy. I've just got a couple of questions just to clarify for myself. On the leave of absence, are you stating that you're going to require a leave of absence, or that you're just going to require that there be a policy if the school elects to have a leave of absence?
I think right now we're just kind of getting our ideas together and starting a list to think about things that we may need to improve on. So we're not.
Just as an understanding, the accreditation, no accreditation company nor does the federal government require a school to have a leave of absence. It's a voluntary procedure for a school to have it. So just pointing that out. Is there any knowledge of the specialty schools and the rules for specialty schools and getting those open in any, just so specialty schools can start that process of opening?
Those rules are not approved yet. As
Okay.
soon as they are, the notify will be posted, so they're
Super.
still in the process.
Okay. And on the cleaning side, I guess the school to an extent to me is you're still raising children. Now granted, there are a lot of second career people in there that don't need my help raising them. But I was raised and my son was raised that if you use the restroom, you clean it. It shouldn't be someone else's requirement to clean up after you. You should be able to clean up after yourself. So I would feel that you would put some schools and some ideas of enabling into a school by telling, well, I don't have to clean, but you know, in essence, if you make the mess, you need to clean it up. So I understand what you're saying. I'm just, as a school owner, I would have probably some issues with what the board decides is okay for me to have a student clean or not clean. I understand deep clean. I understand that there are certain scenarios that don't require that. But if the students are using the facilities, then aren't they partially responsible for the dirtiness of the facility, and shouldn't they be responsible for cleaning it? Because as Ms. Richmond said, you get kids in there that I don't know how to mop, and that's for real. They don't know how to mop, and if you don't know how to keep a salon clean, the last thing I want you to do is opening a salon, especially in this state.
We will definitely keep that in mind as we search out best practices. Thanks.
We'll go ahead and wrap up. 5 minutes, we'll start our full meeting. Thank you so much.
Good job. Good research. I'll help you.
This meeting of the State Board of Cosmetology and Barber Examiners is called to order. We'll start the meeting by having a roll call.
Thank you. Good morning. Miss Anita Allen. Kelly Barger.
Present.
Nina Coppinger.
Present.
Bobby Finger.
Present.
Frank Ambusa.
Present.
Ron Gillahan.
Present.
Wyvetta Granger.
Present.
Patricia Richmond.
Present.
Judy McAllister.
Present.
Mona Sappenfield.
Present.
Amy Tanksley.
Present.
And Diane Tiefenteller.
Present.
Thank you. All present.
I'd like to take just a moment and welcome our visitors and guests here today, and recognize if we have any schools present, any school owners here. Okay. Kurt over here in the corner, I know that he is. Welcome back. Folks, thank y'all for coming and participating in your board meeting. Hope you get something out of it today. Okay. Ms. Roxana, when you're ready.
Thank you. Yes. I believe, Mr. Gillahan, I left the minutes on somewhere near you. If anybody has any changes, typos, anything you've caught, let me know. If not, we will need to have them approved.
Aware of any additions, corrections, or deletions that we need to make? Do we have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept by Ms. Tiefenteller. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We are on your iPads under the main presentation on page 3. We have a school, it's a barber school that is relocating. Mr. Melvin Smith. Mr. Smith? Okay, I didn't think I saw him. As you all know, anytime a school opens a brand new school or has a change in location, I do ask that school owners try to be here. The application's pretty simple, so if the board's comfortable, we can go ahead and approve. Otherwise, they'll have to wait until August if you have any questions. This particular application was not sent to the office until Thursday, so it is running a little bit late. But as far as I could tell, everything that is required is on there. This is Nashville Barber and Style Academy. They are actually moving within the same building, I believe just 2 doors down. Their goal is to do a cosmetology school in the same building, but they did not have enough time to present all that information. So in August, we will probably see a new school application for their cosmetology school license. So you've got the application, the fee has been received, and the floor plan, which is the main part of their application, is there for your review. If the board's okay with it, we would send a field inspector and a board member. We discussed the law changes. The annual inspections for cosmetology schools no longer will need a board member to go. But it'll be up to the board. If the board's comfortable and someone's able to go for the school opening, I think that is probably something well worth still thinking about. And the same thing with the barber school.
I recall this looks pretty much identical to the previous plan.
I think that's what they said. They're just moving a little bit over and it's the same plan, so.
There wouldn't be any further need to check their school application since it's not a new school.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct, yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the change of location.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the change of location. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I think they're very ready to open this school quickly, and since it's in this immediate area, do we have any volunteer board members? This would be anything, Amy, you're okay? Okay, I'll send you an email with the date. Thank you so much. That makes it a little bit easier for me. Okay, next on your iPads, we actually have a proposal for a mobile salon serving the elderly and handicapped. On your iPads, you have several letters to review, so I'm going to give you some time, but appearing before the board is Ms. Joyce Duvall and Ms. Deborah Molish. They are both here. They're here to answer any questions you might have. They've had a lot more letters than what's presented here. You also have a letter in support of their request signed by Senator Douglas Overby. I didn't put all the letters for your review, but I'll give you plenty of time to look at them. I did explain that current statute, the rules does not allow for a mobile salon, that a shop or salon must be on a foundation. There's, of course, the exemption that allows us to work if someone is homebound in their home for their care. They're wanting to do something a little bit different, and I told them that the board would probably be very willing to give them ideas, suggestions, and definitely answer any questions that they have. So I'll give you a few minutes, and if the red doesn't come on, you just push it.
Good morning, ladies, and thank you for coming into the board. If you don't mind, could we get your names on the microphone for record, please?
I'm Deborah Molish.
Thank you. Ladies, while we're looking over your paperwork here, is there any comments or any things you'd like to tell the board or explain about your endeavor?
Before we get started, I would like to know how you become appointed to be a member of the appoints your positions.
Members of the board are appointed by the governor. We all serve at his will and pleasure. We can be dismissed at any time. Generally, we have specified terms since this board is a new board for since they combined the previous cosmetology and barber boards. Some of the terms currently are a little uneven, but they will get into a rotation or flow. But it's all accessible on the board's website. You can just follow the links to the rules and regulations in the law, and it'll outline all of it right there. That's an excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We're going to be reading for a few minutes, but would you all just kind of tell us about your experience that led you to have this idea while we read?
I've been a salon owner for 10 years, and in that time I've had some people that were Always on. Okay. And I have done some handicapped people, but the salons are not always equipped with equipment or sinks that are available for the people that are in their wheelchairs, or that have had serious injuries, neck injuries or something on that order, where they can't lean back to get their hair washed or to get anything done. And so there's a lot of them that stay in their home, which I do know that there are stylists that go to homes and do the disabled or the homebound per se. But what I would like to do is have a vehicle equipped with everything that we need as a salon, one station, to do all the services that we need to perform for a person, handicapped accessible. It has a lift. I do have a vehicle. It has a lift so we can bring them in. And it is more handicap accessible than in a salon. I mean, I know salons are handicap accessible, but they are not for their bathrooms. Okay, there's the doorways. They're the hallways. It's not the sinks. It's not the stations. It's not what we can do for them.
Our biggest thing is the inspections. How will the inspector inspect? That's the overall thing that we are concerned about.
Inspections for sanitation reasons?
For just like going to a salon to inspect that you can't move the salon. Like you might be gone when he comes by to inspect your, what is it, a van or a bus or?
Well, do they give you a time when they're coming, or we could make a time?
No, they don't give you a time. They just
Okay.
pop in.
All right.
That's the biggest holdup we have with that, right, Roxanne? That one of them.
It's been one of the hurdles when it's been
Yes.
proposed through the legislators. Of course, it's nothing that we can change because of the foundation wording in the rule, but the inspections could be worked out. I mean, it's something that other states have done. They obviously can't be like we do now. We just show up, and that's the purpose, to just show up unannounced so that we can see everything.
I agree. There is definitely a need for this. I mean, if you've ever been a caregiver, that would be a big help to have somebody that could come to you. And that's, a lot of people that are sick, just having their hair done is such a blessing to them, So it is needed, but I don't know how we get around our rules and laws.
Okay, the rules and laws, I just want to know, how does the one in Nashville get around the rules and laws?
She is referring to the Parlor 3 bus that the board approved, and I have explained it. That bus actually only does makeup and hair. They do not wash, they do not cut, they do not bleach. They proposed to the board, and it was the previous board before this one, so I'll fill you in. They put in their proposal. They lease the bus. So the bus is actually paid for and leased by whoever is doing the wedding, or the artists are the ones that lease it most of the time. And so it's a leased contract for the vehicle, and it is not a washing service that's provided. So the sanitation is not there. The makeup is all disposable. Their proposal basically covered how they were going to do business. This is very different because we are discussing the individual coming into the bus, definitely the comfort of being shampooed there. The statute does allow for individuals to go to the homes. That's actually under the exemption. And many of our, I've seen business plans by salon folks that specifically cater to the handicap. And so they go to their homes. This, of course, means bringing the individual into the van.
Out
or
of
bus.
their home because of
Right.
sanitation reasons, because of pets,
Right.
because of,
Oh, yeah. Well,
patooties,
I can't-
family members, just, and
Oh,
we
yeah.
have to take all of our equipment into their home,
What,
set it up, where
what-
this way it would be already ready, available, and we could
Yeah.
bring them to us in the location that they can only,
So you're
that they're
just,
in.
you're basically providing a transportation service to.
No.
No.
No transportation, there'll be no transportation
So
of
you'll
any
park in front of their
persons.
house?
Yes.
Okay, it's like mobile pet grooming?
Yes.
Basically?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Do their
Yeah.
service there, and their caregiver can bring them out into the vehicle, because it does have the handicap lift, okay?
Are you going to do manicures, pedicures?
Have you gotten an opinion from the, any of the medical boards on physical therapy? Like, would you need doctor's permission to handle these people, or?
No, we wouldn't be doing those type of people, homebound people. No, it would be the ones that are in accidents, the elderly that don't have a caregiver to bring them, not that they're ill, they're just elderly and they can't drive anymore. They can't get to a location. And I know there are services out there that can drive them and transport to where they got to be, but if they're have their oxygen, you know, they got to carry all that stuff, and we're talking 70, 80 carrying their equipment with them, where they can just walk out their door, come into the salon, and walk back into their door.
And one thing I'd like to add too is that we both have been in the industry for several years, and we have been inspected on a yearly basis. I've owned my own salon for almost 20 years. Never failed an inspection. I've always done well. So the sanitation part for us is we're up to par on all of that. We have extreme education all the time to keep up on the latest technique. I am personally skilled with diabetics because I do a lot of them. And sanitation part for us, that would be a piece of cake because we have done it for so many years. The right way to sanitize our instruments and keep the areas, you know, as clean as we possibly can for what we do. So, anyway,
One thing that
that's a
concerns
plus.
me, like, y'all would probably be perfect. Then if the next one comes along and they get really slack, but we have to okay them because we okayed y'all, then you don't know what kind of can of worms you're going to open in the future. That's the only thing I'm
That's where
seeing.
you all come in for the sanitation inspections. You know, because we're all inspected in our foundations where we do services now. And I know several people in our town that have actually been closed down because of unsanitary conditions. That's never happened to us,
Well,
you know, so, anyway.
tell me about I know my main problem that I've had is, you know, the shampooing. Tell me about how the shampoo bowl is handicap accessible. And
It goes up and down. I have a picture of it here,
Okay.
and I believe I'm not sure if
The
I sent it.
photo of the van and they did not come through well at all,
'cause
so
I
the
have
board
all
members
that.
don't have them because it was too dark.
It's on a crank type thing, and it goes down and it comes up. It moves.
okay, I
Okay.
just didn't know. Just
So
curious.
can I ask you, I don't know if these are your words or just our title, but it says mobile salon for elderly and handicapped. Is that handicapped and elderly only or also?
It could be for whatever, but that was the basic thing because it has the handicap lift in the vehicle.
So it would be a
Because-
full-blown salon that could also service elderly and handicapped?
Yeah. I mean, but my goal wasn't like doing the teenage girls and stuff like that. You know, it was more geared to the ones that weren't able to get into a salon.
Okay,
To come
and
into a
that's what I'm asking clarity for. It's not limited to this, it's also.
Right. I am also a certified mastectomy fitter, and I work at the hospital with cancer patients and lymphedema patients. And I have seen many of the lymphedema patients, there's nothing wrong with their health, except that they cannot get around except in a wheelchair. Okay? They cannot get themselves to a salon to get themselves cleansed, get them, you know, their hair. They need a caregiver. And most of them are very, very large people that just can't, their mobility is not there. And that was kind of what got me going into this because I work with so many of them, okay? I do that as, you know, full-time right now, and then this is part of I've been doing hair for years, you know, 30 years or more. So
I have a question. So this is truly a mobile salon, and right now we don't allow mobile salons. Isn't this a legislature issue that would have to be changed in legislation?
Well, I wanted to know, is it possible to be put into the exemption, and what would I have to do to have it as an exemption? Is it not, maybe I couldn't have water in it? Then we could have the caregivers wash them and bring them in there, and then we could style, cut, do whatever we need to do, just spray them down.
Could I ask legal to go over the exemptions, please?
So, the way the statute reads with the exemptions, it allows a stylist to practice cosmetology or whatever falls in that statute outside of an establishment that's licensed if they are this is the language, in any nursing home, in the residence of the person treated when the person is ill, in any hospital or And the board actually has a rule saying it has to be on a permanent foundation or otherwise rendered immobile. So as a board, I think you have the authority to change that rule or to interpret that maybe more loosely. But the way I read the statute, I don't know how we could like approve this.
That's what I was wondering. I didn't know if we had the authority to approve a mobile salon when our rules state otherwise about foundation. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I have
And I
a
think-
90-year-old aunt that needs this service.
Oh.
But,
So let's just
That's the
think,
law. I
think
mean-
though, now, that's our rule, it has to be on a foundation. And the main reason for that is inspections. So, right, is to be able to inspect it.
Right, and it could have had to do with the look originally. I mean, that's been there for
That's
a
true.
bit. I do know that the mobile salon thing came up, well, and you would know, I mean, it's been presented through the legislators and has not gone through.
Okay.
I do know that it would have to start there probably because of that, even if we tweaked the foundation piece, that within the rules we could, but the fact that the mobile salon has gone through the legislation, now obviously, they have here a beautiful letter of recommendation from a senator, so the interest is there. This is presented in a very unique way, and the need is there. The exemption allows them to do it, so it may just be a matter of
Going
Legislation.
through the
allows
right,
them to treat people in their residence.
just
to carry
not,
their
so
I'm
stuff
not
in.
trying to read that
Yeah.
strictly. It just says in the residence.
so they just couldn't come out to the van or to the bus right now.
it sounds like to me that your first step would be going to the legislature and getting some support from a state senator or state rep to present this bill based on exactly what you're saying about the handicapped and the elderly, so that it's very specific, and trying to get that changed through legislation.
Or mobile salon in general, because I think that's coming. And they found a way to do it with all the food trucks. I mean, those have to be inspected, I think, more
And
than
two,
once
I
a
was
year,
thinking
and they do
that
it.
A way that we could, just right off the top of my head, is if you did have scheduled inspections, but maybe the fee for the license or the renewal fee was much higher, and that way you could have 4 inspections a year instead of 1. You know.
Food trucks have to
I
have a
got a
restaurant
question.
association for the kitchen. So maybe that we could do a salon, or thinking about a
But
salon.
I don't know enough about that.
I do. On the food trucks, they have to be associated because of the Department of Health inspections with the restaurant and the kitchen. They don't actually cook on the food truck. They prepare
Gotcha.
off-site, and that's actually what the deal is. You know, it's not something new. I mean, other people are definitely.
Excuse me, they do
Mona?
cook on those
Yeah,
food
they
trucks
do.
Yeah.
because there's a
They
lot of
cook
them
on-
around.
They have to have association for inspection to at least they do in Memphis. I don't know if it's a municipality law, not a, but, you know, my daughter has a food truck. I know about this, but it's, she also has a base, you know, that where it's actually, and one of the, you know, cool things about it is the law allows one commissary for many food trucks. So, you know, there's a lot of things we can think about with this, but again, if it's not in the, you know, if it's against the law, we can't.
Yeah, I think with our
Override it.
laws and our rules written like they are, our hands are tied. I mean, we can discuss it all day and how great it is, but I think our hands are tied because of the way our.
Is it because it
laws-
says that we have to go into their home? Is that what
Well,
you're saying?
Well, that exception, the exception stated that, and then,
Because we can take our stuff into their home. We
Right.
just can't bring them
Right.
to us.
that would
Right.
fall under the exception.
That would be an exception.
That is
I feel like I need
currently
to make
being
one
done,
more
yeah.
point here,
Okay.
just to be really clear. There's nothing in the statute against a mobile salon. It's just, it requires that you're in an establishment, and they don't define establishment. The exception is that you don't have to have a license for an establishment, and you can treat someone in their home if they're ill, homebound, whatever. Our rules, the Board of Cosmetology rules, is what says it has to be on a permanent foundation. So I just want you to understand that, like, we could, looking forward, I just don't think at this time you can go against your rule.
It needs to start in legislation.
Look at it in rulemaking.
Do you all feel we have enough information to get started that we've presented to you?
I think two things that you really need is you need to look at your risk management, your insurance provider, and ask them in other states perhaps who they're insuring with these, and that would give a safety net in your presentation to the legislature that that there's not really a risk management concern here, because that'll serve you well there. And the other thing is you really need to look at other state laws that allow it and present that. It's a little more groundbreaking if it's somewhere else, and they've proven it to be done very well, and that'll serve you well going into the House of Representatives. They need that kind of information to make those kind of decisions.
Are there any other questions from the board members? Okay. Do we need to have a vote on this, or is it a specific request?
No, their request was really to get your guidance, which I think the board has done, and answer any other questions that they might have. I think in the end, Mona kind of summed it up, that if it has to come through the legislators in January, just knowing what other states are doing, we are getting more and more of this. So it is definitely a trend. It's been presented as a bill before, it just hasn't gone through, and this may be the right way to present it, whether it's because there's an exemption to it, but definitely looking through what other states are doing for the inspection piece, whether they go similar to what the food trucks do. That may be the piece. I don't know why it hasn't gone all the way through, but it hasn't, so that's where it's got to start.
We're just stuck here for you, but we hope we helped you.
Thank you for your
Ladies,
time.
thank you. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
That's what we needed to know, is what to do next.
Good deal. Thank you.
Next, we have a presentation from Ms. Sierra Gordon. Ms. Gordon is here. She has put together a letter for the board. It is on page 14 on your iPads, and she is asking for the approval to be able to offer an instructor program throughout the state. I don't have the program itself here. She's, able to answer any questions you may have. And of course, as you all know, Expertise Consulting does seminars. I believe they've got 3 or 4 sessions this year, and they did last year as well. So I will let you ask her any questions you've got.
Hello, Ms. Gordon. It's good to see you again.
Good morning. Good to see you too.
Have your sessions started up for this year already?
They have. They started in April in Memphis, and then we have one in Nashville actually this month, the 27th and the 28th.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're proposing here?
Sure. What I'm proposing is, Ms. Roxana already said that, and you all are very familiar with, that we already do continuing education for the instructor population, whether it is barbering, aesthetics, cosmetology, nail technicians. We actually do 4 a year. This is the 3rd year that we have done this. We've been pretty successful in doing it. I know there have been some other programs that have been included as far as the continuing education who were able to start for the first time this year. But as I've said, we've done it for 3 years. Now we're wanting to go into actually doing and still do continuing education, but step out on a different realm, rather than doing continuing education for licensees every 2 years. We want to actually go into creating a curriculum for licensed instructor programs. So, for instance, schools right now have, or some of them have, instructor programs. They follow either the Pivot Point or the My Lady curriculum. I'm wanting to be able to do a 3rd curriculum that just would not stretch across Tennessee, but would stretch across the states pretty much.
Now, are you proposing to continue, do this as continuing education, or to take just a regular licensed barber cosmetologist and bring them in to have an instructor program that they're going to get a PSI tested and get credentials for that?
Absolutely. We're looking to do it as far as the PSI testing. That's the reason why I'm here today, because I know there's different channels that I would have to go through. So not only to seek approval, but to get any suggestions, any guidance, things along that line as well.
Have to be a licensed school to be able to get them to go through their testing.
Ms. Gordon and everybody, please, whatever you're thinking about this, Ms. Roxana, I believe that that's going to be correct. In order to have a credentialed program for Tennessee that they could be licensed, you would probably have to have a full school program for cosmetology or barber. Am I
She would be able to do the specialty school.
Specialty school.
Now, the problem with the specialty school, if it's just for instructor, is part of the instructor curriculum, and most of you know, includes working with the students. So you've got to figure, I don't know how that could work, but it could. I mean, definitely a specialty manicuring school we can all picture. But for instructors, because so many of their hours are about actually teaching and working under an instructor, that would be the dilemma for those practical hours.
Actually, to that, Ms. Roxana, there is an instructor trainee, and then there is a junior instructor. The junior instructors have to work along with students and work under a school body. They can go anywhere from a year to 3 years. A instructor trainee's program is no longer than 6 months, usually as short as 3 months, depending on the hours that they get in. And they are not, I guess, necessarily have to work with students. The other part of that would be the student body of the other instructors who are also in the program. They will serve as students at different times. My main concern and the reason why I'm here is for the book of things. Being able to write a curriculum, being able to write a book that is used for testing. I'm not sure if that would involve opening a school of anything of that sort. My lady, and like I said, Pivot Point, they have books that people learn from all the time. Their stuff is just curriculum based and put into testing formats to go along with PSI. So what I'm looking at is fortunately a lot bigger than opening a school. It's a worldwide phenomenon and not just something here in Tennessee.
So you're talking about writing a complete curriculum just for your type program?
For my type of program, meaning instructor training, yes. So right now there are instructor manuals in the school, and we'll just go with my lady. They have instructor manuals for instructor programs that schools buy into. They use it in their instructor programs, and that's what they study from and prepare their instructors for the testing. That's the direction that I'm more so wanting to go in. Honestly, I'm not here for that today, but specialty school will come later.
So I think she's trying to say, like, the master educator is what we use.
Absolutely,
So
that's
she's
exactly what
wanting-
I'm saying.
She's wanting to rewrite the master educator.
With getting them certified, though, if you were going to redo your book and want all the schools to kind of go towards your book a little bit for their instructor training, that would be not your point to get them certified. They would need to go through the school that's going to offer your book.
Right, but the only thing is with that part, because it does include a certification, whether on my end or another school, it'll have to be in line with PSI examination in order for them to be able to study from that book. Let's say the ABC book. In order for them to study from the ABC book, it would have to go along with PSI, or otherwise it would be no point. They wouldn't pass.
True that we approve all the curriculum that's taught in schools, the board.
PSI does every 2 years as part of the contract. We
Okay.
do an evaluation, and many of the board members have participated in that. So the
Okay.
next round is summer of 2016. And the evaluation looks at everything from easy questions, difficult questions, that type of thing, changes in the rules, laws, all that, things that are outdated that need to be pulled. But keep in mind that all the questions, and our pool of, let's just pick cosmetology exams, is way over 2,000 questions. All those questions are in both books. So for the instructors, it's the same thing. All the questions in the instructor exam, that's probably not as big of a pool of questions, have to be in both books, and so now we'd be adding a third book.
And can I say, I've had a couple of instructor trainees graduate, and they go to take their test. Well, we order the newest My Ladies instructor training thing. PSI is still testing out the old. They failed because they studied from the new book. PSI is still in the old book, which I think PSI needs to update the schools when they're
It's on their bulletin. Their bulletin
Yeah.
says which book they use. So they
Yeah.
do not update books
Yeah.
unless we at these expert matter meetings upgrade to the book.
And see, and then it gets confusing for school owners because you're thinking, okay, that's the newest book out. Let's get them the newest edition, which, you know, that's really our fault. We should have caught that.
The
But
changes
anyhow.
are generally not that big between
The
editions.
books.
The books actually do a cheat section that shows what the changes are. The schools really need to kind of look at those because some of the changes are probably drastic and you do need to teach them. But yes, there's no way every year. I wouldn't even have the volunteers to do it. It's a week long of going through.
So now I just call and confirm everything with PSI, you know? As far as getting your book PSI regulated, maybe she needs to contact somebody with PSI, I don't know. No.
Right now, PSI has the books that the board has approved, which is 2.
But
So that would
Whenever
start there.
you submit your book, then the board would review your book, and then possibly, then PSI would, if it were approved, PSI would then take a look at the Milady and Pivot Point, and then your book, if they were all 3 approved. I think that's how the process.
Right.
Okay, so how would I go about submitting that? How does that work?
Had one, Ms. Roxana?
We have not. So the board would have to review really the book or maybe a subcommittee, whether the Rulemaking Committee or a different committee, just review the book. It would probably need to involve instructors themselves and school owners, just that have at least knowledge of what the other 2 books have, because otherwise we'd be, you know, really going circles.
Gordon, have you completed it so far? Are you working on the curriculum that you're trying to put in it?
Well, no, I'm actually a little bit past working on the curriculum to put in it. We've actually started composing the book, so I can have it ready for presentation. I'm actually looking at as far as early as November the 30th of this year of it being completed. Just needing to have guidelines and know when I need to bring it to submit and how does it need to be submitted.
How is this book going to be different from the other 2 books that they're currently using?
That is a great question. Kind of like our seminars. Our seminars are based on teaching methodologies and the actual things that go on into the classroom. I will, by board's choice and approval, experience another seminar this year. So I will be able to compare some things and kind of look at some things. But our seminars are based on teaching methodologies, record keeping, engagement of the teacher, how to keep the students engaged, motivating the teacher, things of that nature. So we will have to stay in the same realm of the 2 books that are already presented, just adding a different definitely a different look, definitely a different perspective. Already being a continuing educator provider is easily steps into the realm for me to be able to go in and be able to relate to the material as far as what's needed. One of the things that I find kind of hard looking at the other books, everything is in one. From your questions, from your study session, to your fill in the blank, to your reading material, everything is in one. Our books will be in 3. Anybody ever studied a course, I know like myself, I need my textbook in which I'm reading and I need the book that I'm working from next to it rather than flipping back and forth and things of that nature. We would have a textbook, a workbook, and a exam review book for the instructor program. That's one of the differences that I will share today.
Gordon, to help you out as much as maybe comes from my limited understanding here, is I believe you'd have to have a finished product first.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you'd have to present that to us for review and
Okay.
for consideration.
Okay.
I can envision that taking a little bit of time.
Okay.
I don't think it could be done in a couple of weeks.
Right.
To give a thorough review by a committee on the board. And then I'm sure there would have to be some assessment of what is the need of adding this, because I'm certain there are probably dozens or at least many other textbooks that are available in the industry that could be chosen. The fact that they haven't contacted Tennessee to request that we look at theirs is their business model. Since you've asked us, I don't think that we would have any problem with taking a look at your work and
Okay.
bringing it in for consideration. And if there were suggestions at that point, it may not be our place to give you suggestions to either put A or B in there as long as you've covered the required curriculum. It would be more probably an outcome of, yes, we like this and it could be beneficial. We would like to add it to our list. Or if it didn't meet the minimum curriculum requirements, that could be an automatic, I guess, disqualification.
Okay.
I'm just trying to give you some ideas is all.
Right, absolutely. And I guess what I would need to know is what that would look like for me as far as if I have this ready for you in December. How long would I need to allow review time? What is review time? How many copies would I need to issue? To who do I need to issue them to? Who am I looking for a response from? When am I coming back before the board?
Exactly.
Again, all those good things.
Honestly, I think that I'd have to look back possibly into our procedures of how we've done that before I could give you a really good answer to that question.
Okay.
We can look into that and see possibly what the time frame was before, and maybe use that as a guide to help you. I understand that time is of the essence on anything. So,
okay.
But before we would appoint committees and set timelines, I think we would have to have a little bit better understanding of our procedure. It's been a number of years since we've approved a different textbook.
Yeah, I'm aware.
And so, and generally having an updated edition is probably a little bit different than bringing in an entirely new concept. So.
And then for me, I guess another question would be confidentiality purposes. How would that work once it is released? Because, of course, I would be giving you booking access before anybody else does. So that would be another concern for me. How would that be approached?
I would recommend that you do what PSI does when we sit and do the review. Whoever's going to be able to read it and give more of their time to review this would sign a confidentiality agreement you would prepare. That's what we do when we sit down to look at the exams with PSI. School owners are there, instructors, and they all know that this information stays here. And it's kind of, I also am going to need to reach PSI because this is going to involve a huge work on their part. I don't know what that will mean.
It could involve money to redevelop curriculum that would add your
include the book, yes.
They really wouldn't review it till 2016, though.
Right, but I need to know if even in 2016, PSI would be willing to take this book and add all the questions to apply to the book. They may not have the time and the manpower, and our contract might not be able to demand something like that, in which case, and legal will guide me. The contract may need to state that we have the right to add a book and they'd have to add it, and that may not happen until 2018. I don't know that piece. I know that we're reviewing the questions in 2016, but that doesn't mean adding a book. It just means reviewing any changes. So between PSI and then legal that reviews the contracts, they'll have to kind of guide us. And by November, I should at least have that answer. This is what PSI can do and the timeline for PSI. So you know if you're looking at 2018 or 2020.
Gordon, unfortunately, the wheels of government sometimes do work slowly, but it's
okay.
for good reason. We'd like to give you the best guidance we can. I know that you do a good job in what you do. I appreciate you very much.
Well, thank you.
In order for us to do this justice, though, I think that we ought to make sure that we have a full understanding of our own procedure since it's been so long. And a little review there.
And I'm prepared for that. I can tell you that it's nothing that is rushed or I'm looking at tomorrow. That's not why I'm here today. Just to get the first approval, also to get guidance and to be able to go along the way with continued guidance. So the year and time frame and all that stuff is expected. I'm not expecting anything outside of that. So if I have any questions, I definitely know how to reach out. But in the meanwhile, I'm okay with what I've gotten today. I wasn't expecting anything outside of what I've gotten today.
Well, good luck, and thank you for coming down here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so next we have on your iPads, we are on page 15. This is a professional workshop. It's a preparation for PSI exams. Before you is Ms. Sharon Lewis. Okay, she did tell me there's a very good possibility she would not be able to make it, in which case she provided, oh, she is? Oh, Ms. Lewis, come on up. Red light is on. Let me finish real quick. have a 2-page document explaining the information that she would like to offer. This is pretty much information to professionals already ready to take the exam, maybe even to students or those that have gone invalid, meaning their licenses have lapsed and have to retake, maybe to those individuals that are reciprocal applicants, and we've suggested they test. So her proposal here is to offer in Memphis on Wednesdays, sessions that hold from 8 to 16 individuals in preparation for the exams, and I will let her answer any questions you all have.
So Liz, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You're proposing to hold classes for previously licensed people or people who have already completed school, or is this straight out brand new?
Well, these workshops are for everything that Ms. Roxana stated, students who are preparing for testing, those who've probably been out of school for a while and haven't taken their test and need some type of refreshing for whatever reasons that they haven't taken them, but trying to reach out to those students.
Now, are you going to do the practical and the written for them, or are you just preparing for the written exam, or are you preparing for both?
It's preparation for both. As far as the written portion, it's more so focused on how to study for the test, understanding what the test looks like, and also it is based on, well, pretty much how to choose the correct answers. Because being in the industry, I've been in it for 14 years, and I've had the privilege of dealing with future professionals who either it's fear or for whatever reasons personal, they do not feel confident about taking this test. And most of them end up either dropping out of school or working in their homes. So one of the biggest challenges, I believe, is them being prepared. Yes, schools have state board, but I know firsthand those classes are not always ran how they should be. So it's more so just keeping them focused on what they need to know and also motivating. And then the practical portion is more so, it's more so facilitating what a mock looks like, because they pretty much already know if they've completed school, but facilitating that process.
You'll be charging them $20 admission fee per class?
You're not offering any hour certification or anything like that?
So Laura and I, oh,
I'm sorry.
go right ahead. No, you go.
I was going to say, was this legal? Is this compliant with everything?
So Roxanne and I have been talking about it, and I think the theory portion of it, I don't like see any potential issues. It's a test review. Like most industries have one, you take it on top of your schooling, and we wouldn't have to license it or anything like that, because like you just asked, like she said, this isn't school. She's not going to be submitting hours. This is just helping people learn how to take a test, which you can know everything about a topic and still be a terrible test taker. So that I totally get. I guess with the practical part, that before I could really give a legal opinion, is when you're practicing for the practical, like are you practicing on people, or like is it being run by a shop? Like
no, they will be using mannequins, so it will literally be like a mock of what the state board testing will look like. So it's almost them practicing on their skill. And as far as my part, I'll be just facilitating, so there wouldn't be any demoing for me as per se teaching them, even though they should already know these things, but it'll be facilitating and giving feedback on what areas they should work on.
So like no one's doing a service on an actual person?
How would this be different than a regular school of cosmetology who said we're not going to be open to the public, that we're going to have all of our students spend 1,500 hours working on mannequins?
Well, again, I've been in the schools. I can say from my own experience from when I was a student myself, what I did not get. And that was one of the things what drove my passion to want to be an educator in the school and go beyond being an educator and actually being the person that they got guidance from in the cosmetology school. a lot of times the instructors that are in cosmetology school have not had much experience themselves in the industry. So what they're giving out to these students is really what they just know from, because they just took their test and they just graduated a month before. So they're not really giving them, providing knowledge per se, or experience behind what they're trying to give them. That's the only thing I can say is the difference, is because I know what to look for. Also, it has a lot to do with personal as well. Motivation. Knowing that you have the confidence to complete what you're trying to do and stick to it.
How long would your course be?
It's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Wednesdays.
How many sessions?
It's a just one-day workshop.
Is this an ongoing weekly thing that you will be doing?
Yes.
How do you plan to get your students or participants, yeah?
Well, flyers for one. Also with this, even though I'm saying for them to come into my location, this is something I would also like to go out to the schools and present as something that they would allow me to come in and do this workshop in their school also. But not so much, since we're not talking about going into the schools, but flyers, also the internet.
So I can tell you as a business owner, I have several employees right now who would greatly benefit from this service, who are done with their hours, scared to death to test, and need another resource. I'd be happy to pay you to send them to this. I think it's a great idea.
I think it would be a great idea for some of the reciprocity people that we send to take the test, and they need a brush up so that they can pass it. It would help them greatly.
Would not be licensing her for anything except she's just doing a business.
Just
It's
to
just a
help them,
business she's
right,
doing.
right. And with the reciprocity folks, when I do have the conversations with them, I let them know PSI offers, an exam of some sort, a book for things, some flashcards, the internet has them. So there are things already out there. This, I think, puts it into one place, and if it's a model that really works, I mean, you're starting out of Memphis, right? Only so her proposal is just Memphis, but yeah, there's definitely a need. I agree with Ms. Tanksley. We get calls that say, I'm terrified to take the exam.
Sure.
Very similar to like the ACT
Yes.
testing, right? I mean, the
Exactly.
school prepared them, but at the same time, it becomes more myopic and allows them to go in probably more confident.
Something that we have to approve, or is this just?
Well, as Laura just explained,
Yeah.
there's really probably no problem with them doing it. It's more of us knowing that it's taking place. It's not going to be in a school, and a certain section of our rules does say that you must teach in a school. So she wouldn't necessarily be teaching in school, but she's licensed, and she's really doing a workshop preparation for the exam. It's not teaching the material per se. And the salons, and Mr. Gambus, I know you've mentioned, the salons bring in people to teach all the time.
Too.
Yes,
Yeah,
right,
they
and the
do.
schools do as well. So I think it falls along those lines where she'd be able to.
Business, period.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Chairman, I move that we accept her proposal as has it drawn up.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second to accept this proposal. Is there any other discussion?
I'd just like to say I appreciate you bringing it to us and letting us know about it instead of us hearing it through the grapevine and not having a good understanding of what was going on. I wish you the best.
Thank you. Good luck.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, are we good, or does anybody need to take a break? This meeting's gonna probably end by 12:30. Are we good? Okay. So next, we are looking at our applications to test our felony applicants. And before we get started, I did want to update us on the public chapter that has passed it. I don't have the version yet. I know that this one went into effect as soon as it was signed, and it's either already signed or will be soon. This felony change, and I'll describe it in a minute to everyone again, but this change is going to affect the schools, obviously, as well as PSI. So PSI and I have a conference call. We're going to sit down and go over all the changes that they're going to need to make one time. even though this one's effective immediately for cost purposes, it doesn't make sense for them to do some programming changes more than once. So we're gonna try to hit everything for the barbers that have to be, you know, the question's gonna be there. Have you been in school more than 7 years? So we're gonna do all of those. So internally, the office, we're gonna still receive the felony applicants just like we have, because the schools aren't gonna be asked differently until it's finished. But we're going to make sure that we only present, starting with the August meeting, those that would need to be presented based on the law. So what the law passed is that individuals can be denied a license, even though we don't, or considered for the probation agreed order that we do, if they've had a felony in the last 3 consecutive years. And so if we have someone coming from a school who had a felony 10 years ago, the board office is not going to need to have that consent order done. We have no right anymore to that, so we're going to go ahead and let them test and push them away. But it would be the last 3 consecutive years, and then the misdemeanor, of course, within the year. So that's the thought until PSI makes all the changes needed and rolls out to the schools what the schools need to start asking for. Is that okay?
That law go into effect
July? It's as soon as it's passed, that one, so if it's signed already, it's already in effect.
Okay.
So, okay, so definitely as of the August meeting, we will be sorting them, and you may go from the 15 or so we usually have down to 3. And then again, it is up to the board if you're not comfortable and want to do the extended agreed order, that doesn't have to change, okay? All right, so for your review, we have applications for examination for Pamela Allen, Tavoris Davis, Jeremy Eanes, Curtis Green, Billy Hyatt, Stanley Jones, Jason Justice, Tony Mikasek, Johnny Nguyen, Michael Wall, Jonathan Waters, and Evelyn Stone Bailey. All these applicants have submitted their letters regarding their felony as well as school recommendation. They will all be given an agreed order to sign upon the board's approval for a 2-year probationary period unless you select any to be done differently. I'll let you review the applications.
Someone who is incarcerated for life, if we approve that they test and get their license, is that always acceptable by the institution where they're incarcerated?
Yes, the institutions actually have part of the requirement with PSIs that they go out to the institutions and test them. So they go out to several of the facilities, test them, and the institution then makes sure that the law is followed, which means they must have a license. Once they've got a license, they're able to cut other inmates' hair, staff, if they choose. Yeah.
I was just wondering, because if an institution didn't feel like a person was reliable with a pair of scissors,
right.
So then I don't,
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
I make a motion that we accept with a signed agreed order.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept signed agreed order. Do we have any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you. We are on page 70 on your iPads, and we have one international applicant. This application for testing is with Hours in Cosmetology for Eva Monge from El Salvador. Ms. Monge has provided translated documents stating that she completed 1,800 hours and earned a diploma in cosmetology in January of 1999. My recommendation, to be consistent with what we do with international hours, is to ask her to take the Tennessee examinations.
Make a motion that she take the Tennessee examinations.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to have this applicant take the Tennessee exam. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
We are on our miscellaneous waivers, and I thought this would be a good chance just to quickly update the board. We are going to be sending out renewals for the cosmetology schools here in the very near future, although those renewals normally don't go out till the beginning of July because we're going through this wonderful conversion process. They're going to go out in the next week. We're going to take advantage of that to give some of the big highlights of the law changes to the schools because they've been calling nonstop. And the majority of those law changes aren't going to be effective until July 1st. So we're at a difficult stage right now. We're trying to answer the schools, and we know that they're wanting to get the right information out, but we don't have the public chapter signed yet. So among the changes is a big piece for the instructors. The instructors are going to, before they get licensed, going to need to be professionals and be licensed for 3 full years. And so that is... I'm hearing a lot of positive for it, and I think it's going to be great. So,
It is.
But
Someone's already teaching, they would be
it doesn't
grandfathered
change.
in.
Right, they're grandfathered in. If
During the-
someone is in the middle of the curriculum, it doesn't say you cannot teach them. It says in order to license them. So it really falls back on us. So it is very possible that those instructors can still finish school, test, but when they come to us for a license, we would hold it back for those 3 years. So it's important for the schools to pass it on. It's up to them if they want to put it in the contract of the instructors coming in to make sure that the instructor, and I'm recommending that when I talk to schools, just to see that, the instructor is aware, oh, I'm short a year. That means that I'm going to do all this but have to wait. And the instructors may be fine with that. They just have to, probably know all that.
Ones that are in the middle of their schooling, they will be grandfathered under the
No, that's what I just said, no.
They will start.
It's
have to have
the 3 years.
Yeah,
So we
okay.
would be holding back their licensure.
That's good.
If that's the case. And one of the schools that called actually had 2 candidates that were extremely, they agreed and loved the law, but happened to have candidates that are very promising that are being offered jobs in salons. And his decision was, I'm going to let them know of this law because they can get a job and start working and then come back. So it's just something to keep in mind. So we're going to send all that information here soon for the schools to know. And just try to find better ways to keep the instructors also aware of the changes and things such as continuing education. So in the rule piece that Laura's going to work on, you all are working on in the Rulemaking Committee, and we'll keep adding, one of the things to think about is the word is it continuous? Continuous is used. Instructors must be licensed for 3 continuous years. That means that if they've allowed their license to expire and run late, that continuous starts all over again. And as you all see from the requests to waive continuing education, that they sometimes don't remember, don't do right, or just have an emergency, it does happen. So I think in the rules, it's something we're gonna think about. Do we ever allow for that extension, or are we gonna be fine and let the continuous make the 3 years start all over again? Because that is going to happen. Just something to keep in mind as we approve these, that I thought I'd kind of bring up.
If they weren't aware of this and went ahead and took the instructor class and tested, they can't use that test 3 years later to get their license, can they?
If they've passed both, if you pass the theory and 4 years or 3.5 goes by, you lose it. You must pass both and then your tests count. But you only have the 6 months to get the license, so that's your question. Yes, they would have to test again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they can definitely do the schooling. There's nothing that says that after you finish the school, you have to test at any point. So they could put off the testing altogether or retest. Yes. Yeah, so it is going to be important that they know. That's why this piece is definitely going to the cosmetology schools, and then we're going to try to do a separate letter to the barber schools that renew on different time frames. They don't renew once a year, so that they're aware that a lot of the laws that change do affect them, and we're just going to highlight the ones that are vital for the schools to know. Because sometimes if you throw everything out there, you get more confusion than it's worth. So I'm hoping that schools are well aware that they've got to go to the actual rules and laws to have the whole thing.
What kind of response have you been getting from that, from the schools?
Oh, it's been constant. But it's been positive. I mean, they get it with the instructor. I think they're, for the most part, really happy. The barber school owners that I've talked to are happy about the change for the barbers needing to finish high school. I thought we'd have some resistance from that. At least they haven't, voiced it to me. But it's high school. It's not 10th grade. And they've got 7 years to finish. I don't know how many barbers would have fallen past that, because since we didn't ask about it, there's no way for us to know.
For the instructors, I think we've always required, at least in the experience, yeah.
Alone.
Yes, I think that most people are like, oh, come back and teach tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the first one we have under our miscellaneous is a request for an extension of her instructor seminar. Miss Andrea Zinai is asking for her extension to the July 2015 session. She would have needed to attend, I believe, by March and missed it, and so she's already signed up for the July session, and this is her first time requesting it.
Make a motion to grant the request.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to grant the request. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
A request from instructor Ms. Elsie Renee Ratliff for an extension of her required continuing education also to the July 2015 session. She became an instructor in 2013 and needed to have attended by April pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 62-4-114A2. An instructor may request a one-time extension, and she's provided a letter explaining the situation.
First request. I guess her first time doing it.
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
The last request is for instructor Mindy Brown for an extension of her required continuing educations. She is going to try to attend the June session in Franklin. She became an instructor in 2013. This is her first request. I believe at this point she's not teaching due to having missed that, and so unfortunately there was no session in between that she could have attended. So.
Motion to approve the extension.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And next we have, this is a little bit of an unusual request. Ms. Sing Nguyen We don't actually have an application of any sort for her. She is actually asking for the board to approve her not having her high school diploma as proof for a school. Ms. Nguyen's English is limited. I actually spoke many months ago with her son who was looking for a school for her to redo her schooling. I believe she had hours in a school that was not going to be accepted in Tennessee due to the from another state, and so the hours were not going to be able to be approved. She definitely wants to be in the industry and went to apply to a school, but one of the documents that all schools ask for is, of course, proof of high school, and she does not have that. The school that she went to in Vietnam either burned down or had some issue where the records were not going to be found. She attests that she finished high school, and that's what she's told the school, but we have no proof, and she has no way of obtaining that proof. So if the board will approve, we would have to send a letter so that the school is allowed that exemption and can take her without proof of high school.
Can we require her to take a GED?
Without the language, I don't think she would pass.
And I'm going to withstand from this one because the
Correct.
school
It's
isn't
your
my
school,
school.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I can say that she has her green card, her social security card, and is very eager to finish. Her daughter's coming there and wants to come so she can have a ride with her. But I'm going to withstand, and it's whatever y'all decide.
I think where she's different from, I don't remember if it was Miss Rios, the young lady we had from Florida who said, I didn't take a GED, I didn't finish high school, I'm really at a 9th grade level, and so here's where I am. And the board said, we have no way of approving that because our statute specifically says you must have 10th grade or GED. This individual is telling us that she did finish high school. Now, we have no proof of it, but she is actually stating that she did. She just has no way of getting the documentation.
She a new student or a transfer?
She's going to be brand new.
New student?
She has tried, but there's no,
right.
I think from the Vietnam War, because she's like 60-something.
Yes, she is
older,
further in age.
and so
Right.
there's no way she can get her records.
Right. And the son spoke to me, I think, many months ago, looking at the possibility of reciprocity. We couldn't take the hours that she had from Texas.
What's council's recommendation?
I don't think that by statute we require how they prove that they went to high school. We just say that a school have like certain equivalency of in high school. So I think if the board accepted her statement that she went as truth, that it would be okay.
She has signed an affidavit to that effect.
I think in the letter, we would need to request in the letter that she provide an affidavit citing that she completed at the level and then the year so that the school has that for their file. I agree with you that the letter can ask for that.
So yeah, and our statutes just say that the school can enroll a student as long as they've completed and passed 2 years of high school, and then like all the other options. But technically, there's no like standard in the statute for how you prove that. So I mean, that is the big difference between this woman and the woman from last month. She's saying she did, and she just can't get the records because her school burned down.
Make the motion that with this signed affidavit, that we grant permission.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept this with the signed affidavit. Before I ask for a vote, I would like to say that I know that this kind of looks like one of those slippery slope areas, and we could find ourselves with all kinds of requests like this. But there's some unique situations going on here. She was from a war zone during a war period when she would have obtained that. So I think, just for the record, that is a deciding factor for me. Okay. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Should be glad to hear that.
Next, we have also a little bit of an unusual presentation for the board. This is a new shop application that the board has received. The shop is located at the same address as a school that currently exists. The school in question has several open complaints. Most of these are actually in the litigation process. concern over the school's history, the owner being the same person that owns the school and the shops, the fact that the shop is located in the building itself where the school is, are all reasons that the application is being presented to the board. Pursuant to Tennessee Code annotated 62-4-127B2, the board may refuse to issue a license with concerns of the history or unprofessional conduct. And so you don't have all the history of the schools because, again, you've already voted on it, but they are open. Laura can answer any questions. We just have a concern and maybe simply delaying it or whatever the board sees fit with the opening of a shop, given the situation.
School is not up to the standards where they need to be.
They're wanting to open a shop?
In the same school?
In the
At
same building that the
Same
school-
building as
same
the
address.
school.
I personally went to that school and inspected, and I would so deny it.
What?
I would deny it.
I'm familiar with the location. I've not been inside, but
Why would you deny it?
I would deny it because they don't come up to the standards of what the inspection is supposed to be, and she was shady. There were names of students enrolled. Students weren't there. Instructors. She took a student from the classroom to pose as an instructor, and
Okay, I'll second your motion then.
and then there were some sanitary issues. There were some safety issues. There were holes in the floors and different things of that nature. So yes, it's a motion to deny.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to deny this application. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries.
The denial letter will probably be drafted by Laura and I, just because it's not something we typically do, and it'll be based on the lengthy history that we have right now going to litigation. We want to make sure that the schools that you all have already voted on, all this history plays out before we can maybe in the future look at the shop application. Okay. Anything else? No. We have a school authorization request, and this is, of course, the last time that we'll be doing this. Effective July 1st, schools will be going through the THEC process. Also, for the cosmetology schools, we'll be sending out a letter with the training dates that THEC offered based on the last presentation and some guidance on how that'll be prepared for the future. So, in compliance with Public Chapter 863 and 818, Nashville Barber and Style Academy Incorporated, located in Madison, is requesting authorization to provide post-secondary education.
Make a motion to accept.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept for authorization. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Next on our agenda is the review of the Reciprocity Committee, so I'll let Ms. Coppinger kind of fill everyone in, and we'll vote that in.
Reciprocity Committee, we only had 6 cases of reciprocity, the shortest ever. And we went with the recommendation on all of those, nothing unusual. There was one where since the person had so many years of experience, we decided to go ahead and grant them the reciprocity. But like I said, very short list and very standard procedure that we followed. So, do I hear a motion we accept?
Yep. A second.
We have a motion and a second to accept. Can we drag it out for a little while?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
You know, I don't like to drag anything out. Have you noticed?
Next, we'll quickly review the Rulemaking Committee also met, and I'll let Ms. Barger take over, and you presented a wonderful list.
Thank you.
Both Laura and I are thrilled.
Oh,
It's
good.
Very helpful.
So what we talked about, and I have got extra copies if any of you wants to see what we talked about. We just kind of began a list of items where we would like to kind of raise the standards, best practices for initially schools, is what we're talking about now, and licensing schools and how they educate students. So, like I said, we started kind of a list where we can add to or take away, and we're going to have to kind of rein ourselves in. I think there's so many things that could be improved, so we're just starting on what's tangible and can be improved and then inspected. So, absolutely, yes. And
It will really help the inspectors when they go to inspect, if they have some type of guideline.
this is 2 pages, so I'm going to pass some to the right and some to the left.
Just to give you information, like in the process, so I'm gonna assume that since the rule committee, everybody seemed to be on the same page with these suggestions. The next step in this process is, so they say the board creates language, but from my understanding, that really means that I present you language and then you say whether or not you like it. So I'm gonna start taking some of these suggestions that everyone's like seems to be on the same page of and start creating language for them. And then hopefully after you guys approve language, we can more officially get the ball rolling on these rulemaking projects. So that's my like plan going forward with this list. So if anyone has any, but I just want to make that clear.
Okay, thank you. And also on that second page, I included sort of a list of definitions for the aesthetics that Washington State has recently developed, just because there's a clear need to define that area that we license especially. So that's just how they define it, and we don't have the authority to create another license for master esthetician. However, that's just for information. So. And I'm sure, any other ideas or suggestions that anyone has? Like I said, this is just kind of starting a list that we can add to and cross off or whatever, so.
If y'all read on the state board laws on how to open the school, what's required, they may want to look at those. They're online and stuff, and see if there's anything else y'all think should be added to that.
And I tried to, because we have the new rules, so I tried going back and forth, what may be added that's not already, but.
In the course of today's meeting, I was thinking about this master esthetician, and we would have to adopt a new book that's more advanced than the standard book of aesthetics for the 750 hours as an esthetician. So I know that PSI took this path with the state of Washington, so would we just request them to, if this is enacted in our rulemaking process, would we request them to, would a book go along with this as well in 2016?
I would have to talk with my supervisor, but I'm not entirely sure that we could regulate a test for the master esthetician. It's a curriculum that a school could teach, but I don't know if I'm not sure if it's not a license created within the statute, I'm not sure if we could regulate that.
But to stay within the boundaries of the rulemaking process, we wouldn't really add a book for more, for the curriculum of it.
Are we saying like each school is going to can offer it if they want to offer it?
I kind of had in my
that's
mind
what
that
I thought.
as the courses for going way back, manicurist or natural hairstyling were added, maybe that's the path that would have to be taken to add a
Specialty
license
school or something?
for master esthetician. A long process.
It'd be like a specialty school that they were going to add on.
Well, it's a different license.
It doesn't exist yet.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, so I know that some schools already teach like above and beyond like an esthetician program. So I don't know if there's a problem recognizing it as a board. I just don't know if we could regulate it in the same way that we could regulate the estheticians. The way I looked at the master esthetician list, that was more the kinds of things that you would be doing if you're working under the super. Some schools teach that, but I don't know if we could like say you have to teach it with this book.
How much work is involved to consider to be a license? When, how, process-wise?
Would have to come through the legislative session, just like the last one that was added was natural hairstyling. And so it would come through with the number of hours that the legislators want and the definition of what those hours are about. And then, of course, we would have to make sure an exam's there and all that.
The reason why I ask is the experience, and this is my personal experience that I've been having not only with my company, but with salon/day spas, is we're losing the better people who want to do it the right way and study because they're going on to medical spas, right? And to me, it's almost like we're the entree into the profession to see if they kind of like it.
We're training them for another entity.
And then if they do, they move on, and we're getting left with probably not the highest quality of what we could have if we had that blended talent and intellectual property in the industry. So I'd like to see us kind of look at it as how do we keep them with us instead of letting them pass through us.
Sorry, this is kind of what Mona's been working on, and we've been working on it in the Rulemaking Committee. And unfortunately, there are certain practices that just are going to fall under the health statutes. But in an attempt to sort of like carve out what it is that we regulate when it comes to estheticians, that was sort of where this project got started. Like, let's be really clear about what you can do as an esthetician in a salon so that, you know, people aren't running off to medical spas to do things that they really could just do in a salon. But we can't expand what you can do in a salon beyond like what's under the purview of the cosmetology.
That's forever? I mean,
Unless the legislatures want to change it.
But could the salon umbrella under a doctor to open up the spa under his umbrella, like in your salon, and then you could go up to the mid-spa with that? I mean, it could work like that, right?
The answer
Well, there are a lot of business
Yeah,
models
that,
out there, but it is a fact that under the auspicious of having an esthetician's license, that estheticians are trying to do all of these things and go to work in medical spas, because medical spas are not only owned by dermatologists and plastic surgeons that do take a training path and a great deal of interest in the safety and care of what the estheticians are doing under their license. There's A to Z physicians that are doing medical spas, and under their medical license, they're plucking estheticians from your spa, my spa, everybody, and placing them, and they have no future, actually. They've kind of jumped into a big lake of no advanced education. It's just it's a joke. And the sad cry of it all is the legislatures and the Board of Medicine comes back to us and they say, hey, you know, people are getting hurt. You know, this is not safe. Nobody knows what they're doing. Well, there are people that know what they're doing, whether they're estheticians or physicians. And that's what we need to define and take some kind of regulatory action. And I've been involved in the legislature just as much as I've been involved here. And I was asked by people in the legislature to try to make this work through the rulemaking process, to fine-tune it. But where they need to take over, it needs to be really clear what this board is going, you know, to be in agreement with. And that's just really kind of where we've always been. And we've been in that position. Having you even talk about it at a board meeting is a great advancement. Having a rulemaking committee and actually taking a look at what the state of Washington has, you know, done. But in no way would and I have to say this for my position on this board, would I ever agree that the Department of Commerce would say that a physician would be the only one that could own a medical spa, and that it would be the only practice of medicine that estheticians could work in, because that would eliminate everyone that you license under aesthetics. Oh yeah, it's been proposed in legislature that medical spas would be physician-owned, so, and that everyone that worked in there would work as a nurse and medical assistant. People who have never even been to aesthetic schools would be doing aesthetic services.
I guess I
So-
just meant on this board.
Well, it's probably not news to Nina. She's heard this. She knows this. So, because of the past board. But that is what I feel strongly that this board needs to position the estheticians that, you know, we just aren't going to be working in medical offices, and that we can continue to be in our profession. It's our progression. It's I don't know anybody that would go to beauty school that would land themselves in a medical office and run a laser for what these medical offices are paying these people to run lasers with no future in education. And I feel it's a great responsibility of this board to see that that doesn't happen. No future in it.
Okay. I hope I didn't make you feel like that's what my stance was. 'Cause
Well,
that's
it's not about feelings. You know, I have a lot invested in my career.
Yeah, but
30 years,
I don't
several
think
million
we've ever
dollars,
even
but-
talked about that. I mean, that's not
Yeah.
the goal here. I think the goal was just to clearly define what we regulate at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Then, if with advice from people that know more than I do, it would elevate the profession to seek a master esthetician license. Maybe we could go that would start in legislation. That was my reason for just offering this information.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That would be a goal you'd like to see.
I can definitely, and I have on this issue because it's murky at best, talk to people above me, but the issue I see is I just, in good conscience, I couldn't advise this board to create regulations around something that I don't read in our statutes already. So I think we have to kind of start with really kind of pinning down exactly what we think the statute is allowing us to do. And then from there, maybe that's part of what the people in the legislature that directed you here are looking for. Like, I hate to use the term draw a line in the sand, but that's how I'm looking at it. Like, it's almost as if they're looking for us to draw a line in the sand, and then they can go from there. But I don't think I could advise that we can have PSA test for something that I don't see that we've been given authority to regulate.
well, I do know that both the Department of Health and they have a device safety entity in the state of Washington. I mean, everybody got together and did this. I mean, this wasn't done under the cosmetology law. Everybody got together and did it. And with the assistance of several associations who have been on the forefront of doing this. But once we're clearly defined here, I don't think there's any hesitation in the legislature as to, working with me. I mean, I have people that, but they just clearly asked me to try to work through defining who we are through the rulemaking process, upgrade the standards, because, I mean, it's clearly we're at the really low end of visiting this. It hasn't been looked at in years. So, we're making progress.
So that's pretty much all we talked about in the Rulemaking Committee.
No, we don't have to mention, okay.
I'm gonna then turn it over to Laura just to review the legal. I think she's got a couple of things to add. Do we want to first vote on all the cases and let Ms. Tifa tell her? Okay.
Before we do the legal report, there's 2 items. There was a salon in Knoxville about a week ago. There was a salon in Knoxville about a week ago where a customer was sexually assaulted while she was there. And the person who assaulted her has been arrested. That person was unlicensed. There were no licensed people in the salon at the time of the assault. So we explored summary suspension. I don't know if everyone on this board has been on the board when a summary suspension happens. Summary suspension is when we suspend a license sort of rushed through a whole series of process, but it's a rushed procedure that has to be revisited at a later date. But the idea is that there is a immediate harm to the public if we don't do this. So we turned this over to a litigator, and in the process of seeking out summary suspension, the woman who owned the shop said that she had been wanting to sell the shop anyway, was getting into another business, and would be happy to surrender her license. So I have her license, and we had her sign revocation papers. I need the board to vote on it and hopefully accept it, because since it all happened within the last week and a half, there was no complaint. You didn't authorize revocation. So even though we revoked it and it's signed, it's not really effectively revoked until you guys vote on that.
Motion for that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I would have a question for you.
Yes.
If we revoke this today and go with the summer suspension, then what are her options if she wants to come back next month and ask for a new license? Is there anything we can?
I don't think in this situation that's going to happen. If somebody has their license revoked and they come back and reapply, it would be presented to the board, and the board would have the decision of whether or not. And once you've revoked a license for someone, you're allowed to use that as consideration to not issue a new license. So if for whatever reason this person reapplied for a license, you would get to make that determination at that time.
You had a motion?
A motion to accept the summary suspension.
I'll second.
Ms. Tiffteller was the second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
The second item, and I'm going to need Mr. Gallahan to sign it. We haven't had anything like this recently, but with cases, when they get to litigation, the litigators will sometimes try to settle them beforehand. And sometimes if the case gets so far that the administrative law judge becomes involved, in order to settle the case, they will require that the board signs the agreed final order. And that's kind of new guidance. So in this case, it was unlicensed activity. All the people involved were personally licensed. The shop wasn't licensed. The shop was later licensed. So you had already voted on a penalty for this person, but since it had gone so far into the process, the chairman of the board is required to sign this agreed final order. They're gonna have to pay a $550 penalty, so if you could sign that.
Want to go ahead and fill the board in on the legal report and how we did, so they can vote on that?
Well, we didn't have any changes to take place on the legal. We voted to go with the recommendations. There wasn't anything that needed to be brought to anyone's attention. It was basically the sanitation, name tags, things like that.
I'd like to make a motion for the greater board to approve the legal report.
Second.
We Have a motion, you can do that.
We have a motion.
I did it earlier.
We have a motion and a second to accept the report. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Read what he was signing his life off away on.
Okay, next on your iPads, and we are on page 99, consent orders for the month of May, total $30,430. I need a motion and a second to accept that.
Make a motion. Go ahead.
Second.
Ms. McAllister and seconded by Ms. Tanksley. Were the motion. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Are the agreed citations, and these are on your iPads on page 100. There's a total of $8,900 received in the month of May through agreed citations, and I need a motion to approve those.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have, excuse me, a motion and a second to approve the agreed citations. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next are your letters of warning. There's a total of 4 cases that needed to just receive letters of warning. I need a motion to accept those and close them.
Make a motion to accept.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. McAllister. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
We are on new business, and I've got a couple. The first thing on the agenda that I have is a school. This would be Remington College, located in Memphis. They are closing their cosmetology program effective May 15th, 2015. This is just for board information. All of their students, they're closing it at the end of, I believe, either this week or next, but all their students in the program have already graduated, so they're no longer going to renew next year, and they're not teaching that curriculum. On your iPads on page 103, the very last page, you have an email from Ms. Donna Hastings. Tennessee College of Applied Technology programs are very successful, and they currently have programs throughout the state. Ms. Hastings on her email explains the situation that she'd like the board to consider. She is at the New Bern campus, and they actually accommodate a lot of high school students, and so I'm going to give you a minute to read her request. She is wanting to know or understand or have the board's approval for the ratio of students to teachers. They would like to be able to accept more high school students. Right now they've got a long waiting list of students and are almost forced to not accept the high school students if they go based on the ratio of 20-1. So as she's proposing it, if there's any way that the ratio can count based on the days of the week that they come in somehow a little bit differently so that they can expand. And Laura and I have talked about it. She'll also answer any questions you have. I think there's ways that they can work around that, because the high school students that come in are coming certain days of the week and not full-time. As long as the students being taught aren't more than the 20-1, maybe we can give them some guidance on how to do this to be able to, allow those students in.
I'm going to remove myself from this one because I work with TCAT in high
absolutely.
school.
Thank you, yes.
Is your recommendation to approve this ratio change or to work within the current ratio setup?
I'm going to let Laura also answer. I think they can do it as long as they propose how they're going to track the ratio. So they still have to meet the ratio of 20-1. I just think that as long as they have a process in place that never has more than the 20 students to the teacher, that they can decide how to make those work. If the students that come in full-time only come in the morning, and so that you're never teaching more than that, but you really in the books could have more than that number of students. And they seem to be very organized with how they schedule students to come in and out.
The way they do it with us is that I've got, say, 20 juniors in this class. Well, their senior year, they can be dual enrolled with TCAT, so they're still going to school with me, but when they graduate, TCAT accepts all of their hours, not just 750 of them. They can also, like now I had one that just come in for her senior English, then she stayed for evening school. She got high school credit for me, but she was in evening school with TCAT, so she was dual enrolled. So even though it may look on their books like they have a lot of students, the 20-to-1 ratio is still in there. It's just not in. It doesn't look like it on paper.
Are you wanting to do this just for like this company, or is this going to be across the board? Is it state school, for any state school, or?
It would be for all the state schools
For
is
all
what they're
state
asking for,
schools.
not just that branch. I think they're seeing the problem, and she's addressing this school because there's a high school right there that works with them. They don't have the budget to hire more instructors. You know, they just, I think if they are able to write out a plan.
Yeah, just show us the schedule.
And they may just be, you know, as long as they have it in their school that justifies how many students are really here these mornings, these afternoons, these days of the week, and is the ratio good at that time?
They'll be reporting to you every month, though.
Yes,
won't they?
absolutely, absolutely. But see, the reporting is hours for the month. There's no way for the office to know on a Monday how many did you have. There's no way, so, yeah.
I would imagine if you walked into any number of private schools at any given time, you would find perhaps just a small number of instructors there and a large number of students enrolled on the books, but only that small number present at any one time. That might be the practice that's actually out there in the general public. However, in the private sector, you wouldn't be able to be enrolled in my school and Tricia's school at the same time. So that's a little different, maybe, than dual enrollment for the high.
If they were going to be enrolled in a private school, they would be going more than 3 hours a day.
Exactly.
So.
Or you would hope.
Yeah. Or,
Maybe not.
with our new rulemaking, they would be terminated.
So it states that, it doesn't state the number of students total that they have to have, it just states the 20-to-1 ratio? Okay, well, I don't think there's any problem with that. Like when I taught English, I would have 125 students, but per class, you know, there can only be 26 students per one teacher. So, till they stuck 28 in there.
I think it'd be nice if they at least submitted a plan on how they want to track that and measure that. Motion to approve, or just a,
Yes, we would, and so I have that, the letter that we send them, if the board is going to motion to approve, would include them submitting a plan to the board for consideration on how they will track and measure the hours, so that when we don't inspect their schools, so I almost said when we inspect, but they are very, very conscientious of meeting all of our requirements, and so that way, at least on their documented paperwork and what they provide to the Board of Regents, it would be approved by us that they are still considered following the statute, even though in book, in numbers, it shows like they have a lot more. So, yes, we would need a motion, and then whatever they present, we would bring forth at the August meeting.
Make a motion to accept with the recommendations that were of how they're tracking their students.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, I want to bring something that just came up with a new cosmetology school for the board to think about, and if anything, at least us to discuss as we're looking at new rules. Is this something worth considering, and how do we address it? Cosmetology schools, in order to open, need to provide 20 student agreements, tentative contracts, whatever, of students that are going to be committed to going to that school. What do we do in the event that the school starts and from the beginning only has 2 students there? I don't know how often it's happened, but now that we're restructuring different things in the office and I'm setting different audit areas. This is one of the things we did just several months ago, approve a cosmetology school with 20 contracts, and when they start for 3 months in a row, I have 20. So I had the conversation with the school owner, mostly to kind of know how that happens. I can imagine that a lot of those contracts would not go all the way through. You know, by then they've changed their mind, they've moved, all these things. But I don't know what the board's thought is. Is there a certain number that we are expecting that should go through? Or is that just par for the course, and once it's approved, we don't worry about how many take off?
If my history is correct on it, the reason that number is put out there was to help to ensure schools that they were going to be able to be sustainable, so the kids aren't putting money in and suddenly being shut down, their money being collected. You can't force someone to continue to attend. But it may be a more murky problem than that. Maybe some of those contracts might not be legitimate on the face. So is there a way that we could ensure that? It's a murky river.
Yeah, how could they even pay their bills if they only have 2 students and overhead and instructors?
They may have a backer or something. You know.
Well, maybe. That's
I'd say the intent of the 20 was to have 20, not to have 20 and assume 18 would fall off. So I think it needs to be a hard number that is that we stick to, period. And if you have more, you have more. I mean,
The question is, what happens if when they open the first or second month of hours, it's down to nothing? I mean, what would we do? I mean, I don't have the solution. I just know 2 out of 20 caught my eye, and it was, you know, something doesn't seem right. And I agree that not all would go through, but do we, when we look at the rules, look at a certain percentage must be there, or do we leave it alone? And yeah, the reality with the applications for schools is I wish we got them 2 weeks in front of the meeting, because then I really could look it over and even contact the students if needed. That doesn't mean that they would know that they're going to back out, but at least really vet the application. I rarely get it on time. It's usually right as I'm loading the iPads and we've got to hurry, and I'm lucky to look at the floor plan. So there would be no time to really vet and make the call to the 20 students. But I don't know that that would solve the problem either.
I don't know that this is ours to solve, though.
Okay.
I mean, I guess my feeling is if you're running a business and you've been approved and then your business fails, I know that that is a bummer for the students who are there, but I'm not sure that our job as a board is to ensure that your business is successful. That's your job. I know that we have schools that have been open for years that don't have 20 students, don't have anywhere near 20 students. And they've got to find the way to keep the doors open and the bills paid.
That's true. I totally agree. But looking at protecting students, as I was learning about all this, the NACAS accreditation requires you to have a teach-out agreement or something. If you weren't able to, you had to close, then you had to have an agreement.
How are you going to resolve those remaining students like we just dealt with? Well, there's something in their procedures set
What you're
up for
doing
that.
in the rules committee and shoring
They can
up
take care of that.
schools is brilliant, because it all starts there.
But if we required them to have some sort of plan, if you close,
Forward, that
what are
would
you
take
going
care
to
of
do?
it.
Yeah, for your students.
2 students, you had 20 contracts. Yeah, students can change their mind and say, okay, it's been so long since you got approved. Maybe if they get their contracts, and I don't know, I'd say at least half of them had to be in school when they open the doors. I mean, because something could come up, anything could come up with them.
Roxanna, have you had a problem with the school, or you had any complaints about them, or is it just something you noticed, or?
No, just something we noticed, and I know we had not discussed it. So as we've set the 20, which has already been there, but for the specialized schools, we set a number as well. It occurred to me that we probably need to think about it now that we're in the, because all of my last minute things here, and then we're done, are about making us think about, so that if we are doing the rulemaking, is it worth putting in? But as Amy said, I think you're right, over-regulating, if they end up not making a good business decision, it isn't really on the board's
Right, if they've
plate.
forged 18 contracts, then that's not very smart. And you're not, you're
I
probably gonna
can't
make
think of
more bad
anybody
decisions.
else, any other industry that board would regulate. I was thinking about archaeology, architecture, and those schools. And there's a lot of new architecture schools, but I just don't think it's our problem. Like you said,
Have
they
you talked
can't
to the
make
school
their
owner to
business go.
see
I agree
if
with
there was a
Amy.
problem?
I did, and the answer was they've all backed out when they realize that the money's not there.
Yeah.
And maybe the key is on the contract, state, the school will not be able to offer financial aid for at least, 3 years? However many years until you're accredited and
A
can
long
offer.
time.
And I think that I can actually see a loophole with a school starting. And you mentioned something about forging those 20, knowing they don't have them. And then if we do something about it to catch them, then you'll find that everywhere. I'm with Amy. It's not our problem.
Not asking your office to take on a lot more work, but would it be difficult for you or be onerous to you to do some vetting on any of those contracts when they're submitted?
And I think if we were to get the applications timely, we probably could.
That's
The
something we
problem
could
is
work
that
on.
we always get them at the last minute. But I think we'll definitely try to start doing that, just so that we're comfortable that the contracts coming in are really legitimate.
We understand, I know that people, when they come in here, they want to turn in their paperwork as late as they can and get it approved as quick as they can. But maybe we need to give ourselves a little more time to work in that if they don't get it in.
You guys are working on these rules
Check
for
out
the
there.
schools. There's an
Yeah.
opportune
Exactly.
time to say that you need to have your
check that.
paperwork submitted 60 days before you plan to, that's ideal. I don't
Excellent.
think there's anything wrong with that.
Excellent.
Trying to get
think
your
that'd be-
applications, the contracts in so that we can confirm them
Yeah, and I think,
in some way.
having a teach-out plan, having a contingency plan is absolutely something that all the schools should be thinking about for a lot of reasons, whether they know how to run a business or something out of their control happens, but having a backup plan is always nice to have. I think students would appreciate that too.
I have an issue, though, of us requiring 20 applicants, and it really don't mean anything. Because if somebody's going to be honest with us and says, I only have 14, they get denied. If somebody says, yeah, I got 20, and 18 pulled out,
There's something
that
not
to
right
me
there.
is not cool.
I mean,
Yeah,
if it
I'd
sticks
rather
to
not
them-
have it. I'd rather, you know what, it is your business decision. I agree with you 100%, Amy. You want to open with 2 and figure out how to keep your lights on, that's your business.
And really, that might be
Right.
difficult to get 20 people to say, trust me, it's gonna open.
It's hard to get the
Put your
20
contract
students,
in.
but
Sure.
you
I'd
can,
just rather not have it there
Right.
if it's there for make-believe.
I mean, it's a statement, it's
You
it's
know?
in there, that's a rule, and that's what should be followed.
I'd rather just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Well, but we can ensure what we're trying to ensure possibly other ways. If they have a business plan, not a business plan, but if they show us their plan, show us their teach out.
But the law states 20 students, and that's how many should be in there. Maybe put them on warning until they are, I don't know. I don't know what your suggestion or solution would be.
Solicit students.
A school is, you do try to recruit. I mean, you go to some college nights and stuff like that. There's ways of getting your students in there.
I
Well,
wanted
thing to
to
work
say
on.
really quick about that. I was trying to, on a case-by-case basis, we would have to determine if we think that somebody I'll find evidence of that to take action against somebody who had 20 students. So we can either decide we're just not regulating it, but if we're going to go forward against it, since there's no guidance right now, it's just, we'd have to prove that they were fraudulent when they applied. So
They submit them, then
if
they're,
I guess the
they're good.
problem is we can't just take someone's school license away because suddenly now they only have 10, because that's not really what
No.
the statute says. We'd have to prove that those 10 were fraudulent, or even one of the 20 were fraudulent at the time.
Would you send an investigator out to see if it had been fraudulently done?
Well, they would have to
How
try
would
to
you-
find the students, so. But I think where we're heading with trying to clear it up
But I
front
think
will
if a
definitely
regulation
help.
says you have to have 20 students, I think that's what they should have, and on their first month of records that they send in, there should be 20.
Fortunately,
Yeah.
we don't have complaints from students yet. We don't have an issue yet. but we're just aware that we need to think about this. Okay.
The last item is regarding our continuing education seminars. I want to remind everyone that signed up to attend one that as a board member, it's just one board member at a time, and it's the 2 days. So if anything comes up, make sure to contact the session itself to let them know that you couldn't make it for whatever reason. And the list is still floating. I think we're covered and that all the different sessions are signed up. A concern came up, and it was Ms. Gordon that brought it up, and she's right. For the sessions that have more than one, not all of the sessions had a board member, but most do, and not all of them have PSI, and I'm not able to attend all of them. And that's just one of those, I can't travel the 13 times a year, and it's costly. So I definitely attend all the ones here, the big ones, and I'm attending every one of the extra sessions, but just not to all their locations. It's just something for us maybe to think about for next year. And PSI, what they've done is they fly in and it's on their expense. On their contract, they have to attend the 3 large sessions. And that's the last time we wrote the contract. So since then, we've approved 3 of the differently run sessions that have multiple. And so they are willing to do a PowerPoint presentation for the sessions to show themselves, but at least at this point, they just can't travel that many more times. And I want to make sure that the board is okay with that. I know that, you know, it's not the same thing, but I don't think those sessions cater to the same, you know, they don't cover the PSI exam maybe in as much length, but it's something to think about because come November, we'll be evaluating and approving the 2016 sessions. And that's something to think about, that a board member has to be at all of them, so do I, and so does Lynn Thomas. That gets a little bit difficult. Just something. That is all that I have.
I have a question about the seminars. Is the cost of the seminar on the board member or?
Oh, no, there's no cost. So,
and the second question is, you attend the sessions like all day, right? Okay.
So it's the 2 days. So it's either Saturday or Sunday. Sunday and Monday, I think, are the majority.
Sign up for that, or are you signing us up?
No, you need to sign up. And I think you're on one.
I did.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Yes. And then do sign up for the session yourself so they know you're coming. But they know that board members are not charged. And then the per diem, the board does reimburse you for.
I do have a question. It's time for me to renew anyway. I would still pay mine.
If you're going to renew it, that one, then yes.
Yes, I still want to pay mine.
You
That's
got
what I
it.
make sure.
That's completely right.
And when you say, when the sessions are 2 days, we attend both of those days? Oh, okay.
Thank you. That is all that I have. Mr. Gilly.
We won't have a July meeting?
That is correct.
So our next meeting together will be in August?
It's a pretty full meeting because we'll skip. So we tried to get as much. We really lucked out on a lighter June meeting. August will probably be pretty busy, and I'll try to get as much information to everybody as early as possible.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion to adjourn.
I second.
We have a motion properly seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. Motion carries.
The one here at TSU in August.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't tell you what weekend it is, but I know it's on my calendar.
Okay.
I haven't gotten to